I've done a few videos in the past talking about Canadian media that most people outside of Canada have never heard. There's a lot of really underrated media from the land of Wayne Gretzky and Poutine, as I'm sure my subscribers already know. Despite only being just north of the USA, there seems to be a barrier on our border that prevents a lot of Canadian media from reaching the USA. And often, the Canadian media that does reach the USA isn't the best representation of Canadian media. Sometimes, media that becomes famous in Canada never crosses over in the USA, or anywhere else in the world. There's plenty of examples of Canadian media like this, but I'm gonna say that the biggest example of this, at least in my lifetime, is the music of Hedley. For more than a decade, Hedley graced Canadian radio stations with hit song after hit song, and consistently scored chart successes in Canada. Throughout their career, they sold over 1 million albums, 4 million singles, won 25 awards, and racked up over 1 billion radio audience impressions and 65 million streams. They were a very famous band in Canada, despite being virtually unknown outside of here. Although I can't back this up with an official source, I'm gonna go ahead and say that Hedley is the most popular Canadian artist of the 21st century that was only popular in Canada. While someone like Justin Bieber or Drake would definitely be the most popular Canadian artist of the 21st century overall, I definitely think Hedley would win that title if you were to exclude Canadian artists with international careers. Heck, I'll even go so far and say that Hedley is second only to Nickelback as the most popular Canadian band of the 21st century. Like I said in the video about my favorite Canadian songs that Americans had never heard, I find Hedley to be a very interesting band to talk about for a number of reasons. Ever since I made that video, I've been wanting to talk about Hedley again. I think it's high time some non-Canadians got introduced to them and their music. The question was, how exactly would I talk about them again? I could do a video where I review all of Hedley's singles in the same format as my favorite Canadian songs or top 10 best and worst hit songs videos. Then again, it would be a little weird to do a video like that where all the songs were by the same artists. I could review all of Hedley's studio albums separately. Then again, it might be a bit repetitive to do several videos in a row reviewing albums by the same artist, especially when none of those albums are recent. I prefer to only do album reviews of recently released albums. I decided the best way to talk about Hedley would be as sort of a documentary/retrospective. This way, I can talk about Hedley's albums and singles, as well as how they all relate to each other. Talking about everything they've ever released and achieved in one video also gives me an opportunity to talk about the band itself, how they evolved over the years, and how their careers progressed. There's a reason why I consider them Canada's Maroon 5. Those of you who've never heard of Hedley and know nothing about the music will definitely understand why I'm making that comparison by the end. I hope to anyone who's never heard of Hedley before, you'll enjoy learning about this Canadian band and maybe end up discovering and enjoying some of their music through this video. I hope to any fans of Hedley, you'll enjoy this deep dive into their discography and careers. You've probably seen the video length by this point. Yeah, this is gonna be a pretty long one. So, sit back, grab your popcorn, and relax as I tell you all about Hedley, Canada's Maroon 5.
It's some good shit. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's some good shit. That's some good shit. That's some good shit. If you'd pardon me, I'd like to say that we do okay. Forever in blue jeans, baby.
Before I talk about any of Hedley's music, let's rewind a little bit and talk about how this band came to be in the first place. On July 9th, 1984, a boy named Jacob William Hogarth was born in Surrey, British Columbia. The Hogarths were a very musical family. Both of Jacob's parents, Bill and Sakorsa, were singers, being soloists and members of choirs. Additionally, his aunts played and taught piano, and his grandparents also sang in quartets. This definitely sparked Hogarth's interest in music at a young age. Hogarth was educated at Senator Reed Elementary School from 1994 to 1998. At age 12, Hogarth began teaching himself how to play guitar. His favorite band growing up was the Matthew Good Band. Hogarth was further educated at L.A. Matheson Junior Secondary High School from 1998 to 2002. Hogarth apparently never graduated high school. As a teenager, he gained the reputation of being a daredevil who never turned down a bet. Apparently, one of the bets he took was eating food off the floor. Gross. While attending Mennonite Educational Institute Secondary in Abbotsford, BC, Hogarth met another student named Derek McKay via a series of mutual friendships. Like Hogarth, McKay also had a passion for performing music. He had 3 friends whom he would occasionally have jam sessions with: Kevin Geisbrecht, playing guitar, Ryan Fedro, also playing guitar, and Kevin Heers, playing bass. McKay himself played drums. After hearing what Hogarth had to offer, McKay brought him on board to him and his friends' jam sessions as a lead singer. Eventually, the 5 of them decided to officially start a band. In January 2003, the band Anvil Brigade was born. 4 months later, they changed their name to Hedley. The band's name comes from a small Canadian mining town of less than 300 people, located about 75 kilometers southwest of Kelowna, BC. The band adopted the name after learning the town itself was being sold for $346,000. Hedley ended up playing a few small shows around the Vancouver area from 2003 to 2004. During that time, they made a demo CD compiling some of their songs. They also released MP3s of these songs, as well as some of their live performances, on their website. If you're interested in listening to any of these tracks, they've actually been archived and re-uploaded onto YouTube. I'll put a link in the description to a channel that has them all re-uploaded. During the time these songs were being performed, Hogarth was working as an apprentice carpenter, which was his day job, with being the frontman of Hedley on the side. Being a small independent band, Hedley was virtually unknown outside the Vancouver area. But soon, something would happen that would kickstart Hedley going from a local name to a national name. In the spring of 2004, Canadian Idol, the Canadian licensed equivalent to the USA's American Idol and the UK's Pop Idol, was beginning its second season of production. Auditions were held in 9 Canadian cities to determine who would be the next Canadian Idol after Ryan Malcolm. According to most sources, Gijsbrecht, Fedro, Heers, and McKay all dared Hogarth $150 to audition, and Hogarth, never one to turn down a bet, took them on. However, according to an interview Hogarth later gave in 2015, it was actually his mother who convinced him to audition. Hogarth was initially unsure, but after learning she had already signed him up, going so far as to forge a signature on all the applications, Hogarth reluctantly went.
Do you have anything you want to say to the camera as we're leaving here?
My mom's making me do this.
Regardless of which of these stories is true, Hogarth did indeed go to the audition when they were held in Vancouver. Despite some initial harsh words from a couple of the judges at the audition, he ended up getting a golden ticket, meaning that he was moving on to the next round in Toronto, one of the lucky 155 people out of the over 9,000 who auditioned. Next, it was time to narrow down those 155 people down to just 32, and it seems the more critical judges warmed up to Hogarth after hearing his duet with fellow Vancouver contestant Elena Watko, singing Islands in the Stream by Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton.
Dude, I take back everything crap I said to you in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, man.
You, man. I never really liked you until this one moment. I didn't think you could sing, and I'm wrong.
While on Canadian Idol, Hogarth met a man named Darren Gilmore, who was the president of Watchdog Management, an artist management firm based out of Vancouver, BC. At the time, Watchdog Management had 3 local artists on their roster: rock bands 9 Mile and Stabilo, and hip-hop group Pocket Dwellers. Hogarth became Gilmore's newest client. Little did Gilmore know that his newest client would end up being the frontman of Watchdog Management's most popular act ever. Anyway, getting back to Canadian Idol, on June 10th, 2004, the 32 semi-finalists were revealed, one of whom was Jacob Hogarth. Now it was time for the Canadian viewers to vote for who would advance to the finals. And, well, on July 1st, Canada Day, 2004, Canada decided that Hogarth would move on to the finals. And I can see why they picked him. His performance of Only the Good Die Young by Billy Joel was really energetic, and he definitely had the most memorable performance of any of the semi-finalists.
You know that only the good die young. Only the good die young. You know that only the good die young. Only the good die young.
Now it was time for the finals. Over the next 2 months, Hogarth continued to advance. It seemed his onstage energy and rockstar-esque exuberance really won over the Canadian viewers. Although he was in the bottom 2 at one point, he managed to survive and keep making it through. On September 2nd, 2004, he had made it into the top 3. Despite being only 2 more spots to victory, Hogarth asked his fans to vote him off. Although that might seem like career suicide, he had a reason for doing so. He preferred to be the frontman of his band rather than win Canadian Idol.
Now, you've got a band back in Vancouver, don't you?
I do.
What do your bandmates think of the whole Canadian Idol experience for you?
Well, they seem to be pretty excited that I went. Or maybe they're excited that I'm gone. They're happy.
They're happy.
Hogarth had only tried out either on a dare or at his mother's urging, likely thinking he wouldn't make it this far. Now that he had made it this far, and it seemed probable that he could actually win, it was something he ultimately didn't want.
Canada voted. The next member of the competition to be eliminated is none other than Jacob Hogarth.
It seemed Hogarth's fans listened to him as, on September 9th, 2004, he was eliminated. Little did anyone know at the time that Hogarth would go on to have arguably the most successful music career out of any contestant on Canadian Idol, even more so than Kaylin Porter, the winner of Canadian Idol Season 2. Sometime after being on Canadian Idol, Daron Gilmour ended up introducing Hogarth to 3 other guys who had previously been part of a hard rock band named Everything After. Those 3 guys were David Cameron Dave Rosen, born July 28, 1981 in Prince George, BC, bassist Thomas Tommy Mac McDonald, born April 25, 1971 in Lahr, Germany, and drummer Christian Robert Chris Crippen, born August 4, 1974 in Vancouver, BC. The 3 of them ultimately left Everything After falling out with the lead singer, Crispin Earle. Oh, by the way, Crispin Earle would go on to become the lead singer of another band named The Veer Union. Everything After would end up dissolving shortly after Rosen, Mac, and Crippen left. By the way, the final drummer for Everything After following Crippen's departure was Jay Benison. Remember that name, he's gonna come back later on. Anyway, Hedley had actually played a show at a nightclub Crippen was working at, and Gilmour asked Crippen if he wanted to play drums for Hedley. At the same time, he told Hogarth that his bandmates were guys in the garage and encouraged him to play with these 3 other guys instead. Both parties agreed, and in very early 2005, Rosen, Mac, and Crippen replaced Gijsbrecht, Fedro, Hears, and McKay, becoming the Hedley we know today. On March 4th and 5th, 2005, Hedley performed at the Canadian Music Week Festival at the 360, a revolving restaurant located in the CN Tower in Toronto. As far as I can tell, this was Hedley's first big gig. Those 2 performances landed Hedley a deal with Universal Music Canada to record some demos for songwriter and producer Brian Howes. Although he wasn't that well known of a songwriter/producer at the time, Howes would go on to produce for a number of other rock and pop rock bands, including Hinder, Puddle of Mudd, Skillet, Boys Like Girls, and fellow Canadian bands Nickelback, Vapor Drive, and Simple Plan. Following the demos, Hedley signed a full-fledged contract with UMC, at the time headed by Randy Lennox. Keep that name in mind as well. With the band now having a record deal, it was time to record their first studio album.
Back down as of right now. I won't hate myself to be loved by you.
2.5 years after initially forming, Hedley's big break had come at last. In the summer of 2005, Canada got to hear Hedley's very first label-released song and the lead single from their upcoming debut album, On My Own.
On my own, and living in a world alone.
On My Own was shipped to radio on July 18, 2005, and made available for purchase on iTunes on July 19th. The music video dropped on August 1st, and the CD single arrived in stores on August 2nd. And it's pretty much exactly what you'd expect from a mid-2000s pop-punk/pop rock song. A catchy upbeat melody, some rocking guitars, and angsty lyrics about getting out of a bad relationship. After enough fights, enough sleepless nights, and seeing how much the protagonist's partner has changed for the worse, they can't take it anymore and have decided it's time to pack up and leave and make it on their own. It definitely sounds like a song you'd hear from another mid-2000s pop-punk/pop rock fan of Hedley's ilk. Probably the most obvious comparison I can make here is fellow Canadian pop-punk/pop rock band Simple Plan. However, I'm glad this is a Hedley song as opposed to a Simple Plan song. Not only is Jacob Hogarth nowhere near as whiny as Pierre Bouvier, but the songwriting never really gets into self-deprecating territory. He's taking the initiative of getting out of his bad relationship and starting anew, rather than moping and blaming himself for what happened. Not to mention that Hogarth's raspy, slightly nasal voice really gives the song a bite to it and just makes it work. Definitely not the most original song to be a debut single, but a good one nonetheless, and one that really gave Canadians a good first impression of who this new band was. And it seems that it was a really good first impression, as On My Own was a huge success! It ended up debuting at #1 on the Nielsen SoundScan chart, the main Canadian singles chart at the time. Sure, it was only there for 1 week after the Pussycat Dolls and Busta Rhymes' Don't Sha knocked it off, but for this band's debut single to also debut at #1, that's a pretty amazing feat. It also reached #1 on the Much Music Countdown in late 2005, an unofficial music chart created by Much Music, which was basically Canada's MTV at the time. Its music video was later nominated for Much Loud Best Rock Video at the Much Music Video Awards, or MMVAs for short, which was basically Canada's equivalent to the VMAs. Unfortunately, it lost the photograph by Nickelback. Also, if this song does sound familiar to any American listeners, this song was actually included in the soundtrack for the 2006 video game Thrillville. The song would later be released to radio in the USA in July 2006 under Capitol Records. Soon after On My Own dropped, Canada would get to hear Hedley's second single. I wasn't able to find a confirmed release date for it. Wikipedia says July 26, 2005, but of course, Wikipedia isn't always reliable. Regardless, Hedley's second single from their upcoming album was Villain. Just like the first single, Villain is another upbeat pop-punk/pop rock track. It's not quite as catchy or memorable as On My Own was, but it's still a pretty good song. I do like how the song's lyrics are a bit more complex than On My Own. Rather than being a song about a bad relationship, it's a song about fighting your inner demons and trying to come out stronger than you were before. It's really emphasized with Hogarth panting on the bridge, emphasizing that he's exhausted, but still determined to make it through. Hogarth also screams louder on the song than he did on the previous single. It definitely hits a little harder than the previous single did. I definitely think its less catchy melody was intentional, as this was meant to be more of a hard-hitting song than a catchy radio song. I do prefer On My Own more, mostly for the catchier and more singable melody, but I can see a good case for why some people would prefer Villain. Also, fun fact, this is actually Chris Crippen's favorite Hedley song. Those were the first two songs, but what about the first studio album? How would that fare? Well, Canadian listeners would find out on September 6, 2005, when Hedley, their self-titled debut album, hit the stores. The album contains 11 tracks. Of these 11 tracks, 3 of them were originally songs from the band's original incarnation's demo and live CDs from around 2003-2004, and were re-recorded for this album. Jacob actually wrote about half of this album's songs before Hedley had even been formed. I'm not sure if that's referring to the first incarnation of Hedley or the second incarnation, although all 4 members of Hedley from the second incarnation are given writing credits on every track. Brian Howes also helped co-write 7 of the album's songs. The album was recorded in separate sessions, one half with Howes and the other half with Garth, Gigi Garth Richardson, who had previously produced for several other rock and metal bands, including Rage Against the Machine, Ugly Kid Joe, Chevelle, Trapped, and Rise Against. Howes would also go on to write and/or produce for all of Hedley's later studio albums. I will say, this is an album that you can tell the year it came out just by listening to it. This kind of pop punk and pop rock definitely screams 2005. Comparing this album to many of the other pop punk and pop rock albums that came out around the same time, it definitely fits right along with them. I'll also say that Jacob Hogarth's voice is distinctive enough in the rest of the mid-2000s pop punk scene. Once again, his slightly raspy and nasal voice really fits for the music of this caliber. It really complements the upbeat pop punk sound in most of these songs, as I already pointed out with On My Own. He definitely carried over his rock star energy that he gave off from his performances on Canadian Idol onto this album. From the overall sound of Hedley, the album, it's definitely trying to capture the sound of angst, and I think it pulls it off well. You definitely get that feeling of being frustrated with the world around you and having that jaded nature on songs like On My Own or Sink or Swim. Yeah, another song about a breakup and putting it into a bad relationship. Another good example is Johnny Falls, another angsty song about not letting others put you down and wanting to get your way. The song's titular character even has a gun, and if you wreck his day, you're gonna get some. Don't push him or blame him or you'll be sorry. That song is probably the most blatant example of the angsty punk sound present on the album. I can honestly see that song and several other songs on this album being Blink-182 songs. I'm also glad the album doesn't try to sound too emo. While there's traces of emo rock in a few of these songs, that's not the tone or main sound it's going for, although they definitely could pull it off if they wanted to. I guess they wanted to distinguish themselves from fellow Canadian pop punk / pop rock band Simple Plan. Not every song is a punk rager though. A few of them manage to sound a little bit softer with brighter melodies and less heavy guitars, including one song that's essentially a flat-out acoustic ballad, but I'll get to that song later. One particular highlight on this album for me was the song Saturday, which is actually my second favorite song on the album. I'll get to my number 1 favorite song on the album later. But anyway, Saturday is a mid-tempo song with lyrics about being with a partner that you actually hate, but this partner is on the receiving end of cruelty from the world all the time. At least the hate is some connection, plus, it's just another Saturday for this person. This is juxtaposed with easily the brightest melody on the entire album, and a really pleasant melody and guitar line, plus a guitar solo on the bridge. I Don't Believe It is another song about ending a relationship due to love wearing off and not wanting your partner to get the best of them that manages to sport a really upbeat pop-punk sound that's just a ton of fun, with yet another guitar solo, definitely a more peppy one than the one on Saturday. There's definitely dark shades to this album, but there's light shades as well, and I think they complement each other really well. Depending on your mood, you might like the darker songs like Johnny Falls more, or the brighter songs like Saturday more. Then of course, there's songs like Sugar Free that strike that perfect middle ground. Maybe this album is a bit of a product of its time. Again, it's an album that screams 2005, but it's also an enjoyable listen. There's definitely some songs on here that I come back to again, and maybe it's also not the most distinctive pop punk / pop rock album. I made the comparisons to Blink-182 and some of the other pop punk / pop rock albums that came out around the same time earlier, but I don't feel like that's a detriment. All in all, Hedley's self-titled debut album is pretty good. After its release, it peaked at number 3 on the Canadian Albums Chart. On September 2nd, 2005, the album was certified gold by the Canadian Recording Industry Association, or CRIA, the Canadian equivalent to the RIAA. 4 months later, it was certified platinum and later 2 times platinum. It's worth noting that before May 1st, 2008, hey, that's my 9th birthday, an album needed to sell 100,000 copies to be certified platinum by the CRIA. After that date, an album needed to sell only 80,000 copies to be certified platinum. The album was later nominated for Rock Album of the Year at the 2006 Juno Awards, the Canadian equivalent of the Grammy Awards. Unfortunately, it lost to All the Right Reasons by Nickelback. It was nominated again at the 2007 Juno Awards for the All Genre Album of the Year category, but it again lost, this time to Loose by Nelly Furtado. The day after their debut album came out, Hedley performed On My Own on Canadian Idol. The day after that, they performed Villain on Much Music, kicking off their very first tour. The tour lasted until October 10th, taking place in 16 locations across Canada, and featured supporting acts Faber Drive, then known as Faber, and The Weeknd. What? No, not that The Weeknd. That The Weeknd. Yeah, there's a band from Toronto called The Weeknd, and fun fact, they're actually the reason why the Blinding Lights singer spells his stage name without the 30 in the word weekend. That was a tangent. On November 22nd, Hedley kicked off yet another tour, this time lasting until December 17th in 19 locations across Canada, with Simple Plan headlining. And by this time, they had now released a third single from their debut album, Trip. Trip was released as the band's third single. Again, I couldn't find a confirmed release date, but Wikipedia says October 4th, 2005. But anyway, compared to Hedley's first two singles, Trip has a much brighter melody to it. Not quite as bright as that on Saturday, but definitely brighter regardless, as if to make it sound more pleasant and heavenly. And given the religious subtext of the song, that seemed to be intentional, with the very first lyric of the song mentioning how some say love is not for sinners, but love showed our protagonist their partner, and our protagonist ran through the garden and tripped on the gate. Despite the protagonist being in love with this person, they can't wash their hands clean of them, and they'll never be able to follow through. This person is slowly killing them, and despite being into them, they just can't be with them. It seems to be implying that this person is bad for them, but they're still tempted to be with them like Satan. They can't get through Heaven's Gate due to being a sinner and being tempted by someone bad. It's a song that really gets deeper the more you analyze it. Maybe they could have gone a little further with the religious subtext by explicitly saying that the gate they tripped on was Heaven's Gate and making references to demons or lust or temptation, but it doesn't change what's still a really good single. It's definitely the most pleasant sounding of the band's three singles, especially with the happy major key sound and the slightly softer guitars on the verses, while still remembering to hit a crescendo on the chorus. Trip apparently peaked at number 11 on the Nielsen SoundScan chart. Due to Nielsen SoundScan being a physical singles-only chart and the limited amount of sources online for it, On My Own and Trip appear to be the only two singles from Hedley's self-titled album that actually charted on as far as I can tell. It did peak at number 1 on the Much Music countdown though. Again though, that wasn't an official music chart. I'm pretty sure songs needed to have music videos to be eligible for that chart. This song, as well as Hinder's Lips of an Angel, would later earn Brian House a nomination at the 2007 Juno Awards for Producer of the Year, which he won. On February 28, 2006, Hedley released the EP Simpatico MSN Live at the Orange Lounge. The EP contains 5 tracks, all of which are live recordings of 5 songs from Hedley's album during their December 8th show at the Orange Lounge in the Scotiabank Arena, then known as Air Canada Centre in Toronto.
On my own, living in a world alone. Gets better every day, 'cause I don't have to see I'm sorry, I'm coming home. What are you doing to me? I'm so into you, and the hardest part is knowing that I'll never follow.
Hedley was actually one of several Canadian artists to release an EP with this exact title for the now-defunct Canadian music store Simpatico MSN. I'll be honest, I'm not really a fan of live releases. I always prefer the studio versions. Live recordings are obviously done in one take and lack the polish that studio versions have due to being recorded in one take outside the studio instead of multiple takes in the studio. Not to mention that with these specific recordings, they really soften these songs. Not only does Hogarth tone down his voice and doesn't scream anymore, but Rosin is playing on an acoustic guitar instead of an electric guitar, and Crippen's not playing any drum kit here. Only the recordings of Saturday and Villain contain any drums, and they sound like bongo drums. I really don't like the fact that they shaved off the rock edge from these recordings, which especially detriments the recordings of On My Own, Johnny Falls, and Villain, which are supposed to be hard-hitting pop-punk songs. Unless you're a hardcore Hedley fan, you can skip this EP. You're not really missing much. The same day the EP dropped, Hedley kicked off yet another tour, this time lasting until March 31st in 26 locations across Canada, marking their biggest tour yet. Faber once again joined as a supporting act, as did American pop-punk band MXPX. While on this third tour, Wikipedia says March 14th, Hedley released their 4th single, and this one's an absolute banger, 3, 2, 1.
3, 3, 2, 1. It's the final meltdown. I want out now.
Fun fact, 321 is the first Headley song I ever heard. I first heard it as a track on YTV Big Fun Party Mix 8. This was an album in a compilation series released by the channel YTV, the Canadian equivalent to Nickelodeon, featuring clean versions of popular songs from the time, plus maybe an occasional song from a cartoon like the Pokemon theme song or Ripped Pants from SpongeBob. It was Headley's second song in this compilation series, as On My Own previously appeared on Volume 7. By the way, I'm not going to go into all of Headley's appearances on compilation albums. I just figured I'd bring up the YTV Big Fun Party Mix albums since I owned Volumes 8 and 9 as a kid, although I've since given them away. Anyway, getting back to 321, I'll admit there is some nostalgia in me saying this, but this is my favorite song from Headley's debut album, and I'm really glad it was chosen to be a single. It's got a lot of the same good qualities On My Own had: a catchy melody, some great rocking guitars, and angsty lyrics about trying to get out of a bad relationship. In 321, however, the song's protagonist saw the red flags in advance, but turned a blind eye to them, and entered the relationship anyway, only to realize once the intimacy started that it was a bad idea and now wants out. If you liked On My Own, you'll probably like 3212 and vice versa, and I say this as someone who heard 321 first. This song would end up earning Headley their third #1 on the Much Music Countdown, and another nomination at the 2006 MMVAs, this time for People's Choice Favorite Canadian Singer. Unfortunately, they lost to Simple Plan for Crazy. Speaking of which, Headley were one of the performers at the 2006 MMVAs, broadcast on June 18th. This was her second time performing at an awards show after the 2006 Juno Awards, broadcast to 1.7 million people back on April 2nd. Backing up to the 2006 Juno Awards, I already talked about their Album of the Year nomination, but Headley ended up receiving another nomination at the Junos that year, for New Group of the Year. Unfortunately, they lost that one as well, this time to Bedouin Soundclash. On June 21st, 2006, Headley kicked off yet another tour, and an even bigger one than the last one, taking place in 36 locations, not just in Canada, but in the USA too. This was actually Headley's first tour taking place in the USA. At least 4 of the dates had Canadian singer Phoebe Dobson as a supporting act, and at least one had Canadian bands Simple Plan and Mobile as supporting acts. Headley themselves were also supporting acts for fellow rock bands Yellowcard and Matchbox Romance that summer. Sometime later in 2006, Wikipedia says September 12th, Headley's 5th single was released, Gunnin'.
And I'm gunning for you.
I'm gonna be honest, Gunnin' is easily my least favorite song from Headley's self-titled album, and I have no idea why it was chosen as a single, or even to be on the album. It sticks out like a sore thumb compared to the rest of the album, and is a song that fits in with the album the least. Unlike the rest of the album, it's a slow acoustic song that doesn't have any of the pop-punk elements that the rest of the album had. It strips out the electric guitar and upbeat sound for one that, if it wasn't for its soft rock edge peeking through on the chorus and layered guitars, would sound like an acoustic ballad, like something from John Mayer. Honestly, even if this was a John Mayer acoustic ballad, I'd probably still find it boring. Nothing about the melody or instrumentation sticks out to me in any way. It's not memorable or makes me feel like singing along to it, and its lyrics are just about feeling weak and frail following a breakup. Even from what Headley had released thus far, they had songs with much more interesting lyrics than this. It definitely feels the most half-assed of any song Headley had released thus far. I guess Jacob Hogarth's voice prevents it from being a total slog. He is a damn good singer, he was #3 on Canadian Idol for a reason, but it still doesn't do much to help a rather boring, mediocre song, and one that I definitely put among my top 5 least favorite Headley songs. Maybe Headley wanted to show that they were capable of making slow songs too, but they have gone to create much better ballads down the line, which we'll definitely be getting to. This is one song you can gladly skip. The song was yet another #1 on the Much Music Countdown for Headley, and the first one to be #1 for more than 1 week, with 2 weeks at the top. Just like how Tripp earned Brian Howe's a nomination for Producer of the Year at the 2007 Juno Awards, Gunnin', as well as Villain, earned Gigi Garth Richardson the very same Juno nomination at the 2006 Juno Awards. Unfortunately, he lost to Neil Young for The Painter. The song's music video, which, by the way, has some cool tattoo text appearing and disappearing on Jacob Hogarth's body, was nominated for 3 awards at the 2007 MMVAs: Best Post-Production, People's Choice Favorite Canadian Group, and Best Pop Video, winning only the latter. On September 12, 2006, Headley's debut album would be released in the United States under Capitol Records. On November 21st, 2006, the album would be reissued in Canada. This reissue was known as the Platinum Edition, with a brand new album cover, which was also used for the American Standard Edition, and 4 new tracks, 3 of which are just new versions of songs on the original standard version. I do definitely prefer the full mix of Gunnin' as opposed to the original, as it's more rock sounding and less boring sounding. On November 21st, 2006, the DVD Try This at Home was released. It was directed by Headley, executive produced by Watchdog Management President Darren Gilmore, Alan Reed, and Sean Marino, and edited by Ainsley Kennedy and Telma Costa. It was filmed at various times and locations between July 19, 2005 and September 21, 2006, while touring and performing. It is split into 18 chapters, containing footage of many of the antics that happened, particularly regarding Jacob Hoggard, that occurred while Headley was on the road and visiting various places. Occasionally, footage of Headley performing at a show is interspersed, or one of Headley's songs is played while visiting certain places. I'm sure someone else might find this DVD amusing or funny, but personally, I find Try This at Home to be too edgy for my liking. First of all, it's rated R. There's quite a bit of on-screen nudity in it. The second chapter involves Jacob Hoggard and Tommy Mac getting the word Headley tattooed on their butts in celebration of their debut album going platinum. The third chapter involves them playing with a flamethrower and creating the illusion of flames coming out of their butts. And yes, their butts are clearly visible on screen and are not censored. Genitals are censored, but not butts.
Well, now that we're gonna go walk the Cracker
We can
Barrel.
totally show it. They can put a blur. You can put a blur on my dick, right? Yeah. There, look, we're blurring my dick.
Some of the other antics involve Hoggard going to the hospital to get stitches for wounding his leg after falling off the band's trailer while trying to do a handstand on top of it, Hoggard and Mac drinking milk straight out of a cow's udder, Dave Rosen squeezing himself inside a car tire, and the other three members rolling the tire along a street, Hoggard and Chris Crippen attempting to break into Rosen and Mac's hotel room to prank them, Mac getting put in handcuffs and Hoggard pantsing him and then slapping his butt, shooting posters with machine guns, and more. I'll admit a couple of these were slightly amusing, but most of them I really didn't care for. First of all, dude, playing with a flamethrower is dangerous, especially when you're putting it right next to people's private parts and the flames actually touched Crippen's junk.
Ready? Yeah.
Also, some of these chapters really disgusted me. I really didn't want to see a close-up shot of Hoggard's open wound, or Mac peeing through a tube that goes out his pants that comes out his pant leg, or Hoggard saying he'll go number 2 in the toilet tank in the bathroom of their hotel room, or being dared to eat Crippen's blister and him actually doing it. And that's not even the most disgusting dare he did in this DVD. I'm not even going to mention the other dares. There are definitely a few scenes in this DVD that are legit pornographic, and if the genitals weren't blurred out, this DVD might actually pass for a porno. Also, pointing a toy pistol at a stranger and even shooting him with it isn't cool. That's illegal in Canada, and I'm pretty sure that's not the only crime Hoggard committed in this DVD. He was definitely guilty of indecent exposure a few times, though it's unclear if he was breaking the law there, since in Canada, indecent exposure is generally only illegal if it's inherently sexual or involves people under the age of 16.
Bunch of hooligans, I swear to God, I don't know why we're not all in jail.
Regardless, there's definitely some stuff in here that wouldn't fly today. Again, maybe some people will be more forgiving of what happens in this DVD than I am and find this stuff hilarious, but I wasn't really crazy about it. Only watch this DVD if you're genuinely curious and you're at least 18. Try This at Home was later nominated for Music DVD of the Year at the 2007 Juno Awards. Unfortunately, it lost to Escarpment Blues by Sarah Harmer. Headley themselves were also nominated for Group of the Year at that same award show, but they unfortunately lost to Billy Talent. Oh, by the way, I'm getting this out of the way now so I don't have to keep repeatedly mentioning this later. Headley will be nominated for Group of the Year 6 more times between 2008 and 2018, and they would not win any of those times. Anyway, getting back to 2006, just before the year ended, Headley ended up releasing one last thing, the 6th and final single from their self-titled debut album. Again, I couldn't find a confirmed release date, Wikipedia says December 2006, but regardless, Headley's 6th single was Street Fight.
Got in a street fight with the IRS and I'm alright. Took one to the chest.
Street Fight is another song that seems to have a deeper meaning when you look into its lyrics a little deeper. The very first line of the song says that the titular Street Fight is actually with the IRS. The song then seems to go on to say that the singer doesn't really care about being famous. On the chorus, they say, "I'm tired of this. What you see is what I've never tried to be." And on the second verse, they don't care about their 15 minutes of fame being over and denounce people calling them a sellout for being on TV when they're hypocrites by being the ones wearing name brand shoes. The song also talks about how it's all coming up roses, and on the bridge, the singer says that they want someone to buy them an ocean and take them anywhere but here. It very much goes along with the punk sound and jaded nature of the rest of the album. That street fight with the IRS was probably just a metaphor. He probably has to pay more taxes to the IRS now due to being famous. Maybe a song about how you don't care about fame is a bit weird, coming from the second runner-up from Canadian Idol, and it's especially ironic given the direction Headley would end up going with their music down the line. Stay tuned, but it's a song that still works for what it is. Definitely a better single than Gunnin', though not quite as good as 321 or On My Own. By the way, the music video for Street Fight is just a bunch of clips from the Try This at Home DVD. Well, the less explicit scenes, not the parts that have exposed private parts or some of the genuinely gross stuff that happened on the DVD. Obviously, it needed to be appropriate enough to play on Much Music, and it was played on Much Music enough for it to reach number 18 in the Much Music Countdown, becoming their first song there to not reach number 1. And that pretty much wraps it up for Headley's very first studio album. They made a pretty good first impression, I must say. Their debut album going platinum, their debut single going to number 1 on the Nielsen SoundScan chart, 4 number 1s on the Much Music Countdown, touring with Simple Plan. Canada seemed to love this breakout pop-punk/pop rock band and was eager to hear more. The only question was, how exactly would they be able to follow themselves up? Well, let's take a look and find out.
Cause we're only getting better. We're not making this up. So just write another letter.
A new year brings new music, and 2007 certainly would be a year of new music for Headley, but not before going on tour again. Headley went on 2 short tours in 2007, one from January 15th to January 27th in 9 locations, and one from June 28th to July 28th in 7 locations. 3 of these shows were actually for Nickelback's All the Right Reasons tour, where Headley were one of the opening acts. This was definitely prepping Headley fans for album number 2, and well, on August 24th, Canada got to hear the lead single from Headley's upcoming second album, She's So Sorry.
Get out of my way, what did she say? She's so sorry.
Now here's an absolute banger of a track. She's So Sorry is exactly the kind of song that was intended to be performed in a mosh pit. It's easily the heaviest song from Headley's entire discography, with the heavy guitars, drums, the kick-ass guitar solo on the bridge, and Hogarth's angry, snarling vocals. And well, for a song about a partner who ended up ruining the relationship she had, it's definitely very fitting. And despite her trying to shift the blame and limply saying sorry and claiming she wants to start over, her ex-boyfriend isn't buying it and is leaving her. Both its lyrics and composition are definitely tend to get your adrenaline rushing, and I definitely think it does its job. This is definitely the closest thing Headley have ever made to a metal song, and is the most obvious giveaway that the 3 instrument players in Headley were previously part of a hard rock band, but yet it never gets too loud and obnoxious, and manages to sport a melody that, while far from Headley's catchiest, is still singable, and one to make you rock out to it. And Canada did certainly rock out to the song, enough to make it peak at number 50 on the Canadian Hot 100, which had now replaced Nielsen SoundScan as the official Canadian songs chart, and unlike Nielsen SoundScan, incorporated digital single sales. It also peaked at number 1 on the Much Music Countdown for 4 weeks, during December 2007 to January 2008, breaking the record for most weeks at number 1 on that chart. Speaking of Much Music, the song's music video was nominated for 2 awards at the 2008 MMVAs, Much Loud Best Rock Video, which it won, and Best Cinematography, which it lost to... Actually, I'll come back to which song won that award later. A couple months later, Canada would finally get to hear Headley's sophomore album, Famous Last Words, released on October 30th, 2007. The album contains 12 tracks, or 13 if you pre-order it on iTunes. The album was co-produced by Greg Norrie, frontman of the band Treble Charger, and former producer and manager for Sum 41, and Dave Genn, guitarist for the Matthew Good Band and 5440, who also co-wrote 4 songs for Headley's debut album. Genn and Norrie, as well as Brian Howes, the members of Headley, and a handful of other songwriters, wrote the album's songs. Famous Last Words is probably the textbook example of a follow-up album. It's an album that takes the sound the artist had in the first album and, for the most part, continues it. Many of the songs on this album probably would have just as easily fit on their debut album. That being said though, of the first 2 albums, I definitely prefer Famous Last Words. It laces the pop-punk/pop rock sound from the debut album with upbeat sound and catchy melodies, and boasts a few of the best songs from Headley's entire career. My sister actually used to own this album on CD, and she used to play it all the time when we were kids, and I can definitely see why she enjoyed it so much. Unlike their first album, which had Gunnin', there's no song on Famous Last Words that I think is below average. All these songs are pretty good. Some songs I'll definitely remember better and go back to more, but I can't really pick a least favorite song on here because I don't dislike any song on here. Of course, this album's sound isn't totally identical to their debut. This album has a brighter sound than its predecessor. I mentioned how there were dark shades and traces of emo on Headley's debut album. On Famous Last Words, those elements are gone. Just about all the songs on here are bright songs. There's not really an equivalent to Johnny Falls or Sink or Swim on here. It's still a pop-punk/pop rock album to be sure, just without any of the dark sounds the previous album had. There's also not quite as much lyrical angst on this album as there was on Headley's debut album. You still get a bit of angst on here on songs like Been There Done That or Dear Blank, but it's definitely not to the same extent as we heard on the previous album. That being said though, These music and lyrics are still familiar enough to their first album to sound like it's from the same band and to not alienate the fans they got from their first album. Another difference in sound Famous Last Words has from its predecessor is that it really succeeded in sounding like it's coming from a high school band. Even though Jacob Hogar was 4 years out of high school when this album came out, he still manages to sound like a high schooler when he sings the album's lyrics, as most of these songs do sound like they're being sung from the perspective of a high schooler. The song Narcissist is probably the most blatant example. The very first line of the song mentions a has-been high school hero. He's in love with his reflection in the glass, only cares about himself, and will only be your friend if you're cool. Sounds like your typical high school jock. Then the second verse describes a suburban princess who's a daddy's girl, makes gold card purchases, and thinks the whole world revolves around her. Sounds like your typical high school rich girl. It's a very cleverly written song that highlights the narcissism of both these characters and mocks how shallow and stuck up they both are. And when they both meet up on the bridge, they both fall in love with each other. After all, who better to fall in love with than someone who's just as delusional and self-obsessed as yourself? Another example is the second verse of Dear Blank, with the lines, just how did this jerk make it through school without ever getting plowed? That wannabe. Yeah, that definitely sounds like something that one high school student would say about another. Many of the songs on Famous Last Words are about relationships in one way or another. In addition to the aforementioned She's So Sorry, there's also Hand Grenade, a song about turning down a girl, knowing that you're not good for her, and that a potential relationship with her would be bad. Brave New World, which, by the way, was another song from Hedley's original Incarnations live album from 2003 or 2004, a song about standing up to an abusive partner, or Can't Go Back, a song about not returning to an old partner and leaving your mistakes in the past. Even Lose My Number, the iTunes pre-order track, is a song about not putting up with the girl you used to love, but that you now have to fight with, and decide you're not going to wait for them to dump you, and tell them to not forget to lose your number. There's surprisingly quite a few breakup songs on this album. There's only one actual love song, which I'll talk about later. Another lyrical theme on this album is self-reflection and owning up to your mistakes. A few of these songs about relationships I mentioned overlap here, like Brave New World or Can't Go Back. In addition, we also have Bone Shatter Never Say Never, a song about improving oneself in the wake of a fan injuring themselves at a concert, and not feeling like this incident means you have to retire. Or Dear Blank, a song about the crazy thing someone's done while they were drunk, and owning up to everyone that hurt, and not feeling like they owe anyone an apology. Maybe not the best message. If you end up hurting someone but don't realize the extent of the harm you caused because you're intoxicated, you should always apologize. But how can you complain when the song is just so much fun and energizing? That song has one of Hedley's best guitar lines, paired with another upbeat pop-punk melody. Again, this album really sounds like it was made by a group of high schoolers or college guys. In addition to the lyrics, it really pulls off that teenager/young adult sound pretty well in the production as well. Whether it's with the frat guy chanting on Hand Grenade, or the second single, which I'll talk about just a little bit, sounding like a high school love song, perhaps one you'd hear at prom, or the fourth single, which again, I'll get to later. No wonder my sister loved this album so much. She was probably blasting this album all throughout her teenage years. This album was really made for her. For the most part, Famous Last Words is a brighter, less angsty continuation of the sound Hedley had on their self-titled album. It's safe to say that if you liked Hedley's first album, you'll like Famous Last Words too. The main difference between this album and the band's first album to me is, again, that high school perspective the album seems to be going for. Not every song is an upbeat pop-punk/pop rock song though. I'll get to the couple of songs that are exceptions later, but unlike Gunnan, these exceptions don't feel out of place on this album, and I'm glad they were included. All of this amounts to a pretty good album. There's definitely some differences between this album and its predecessor, but those differences actually elevated up more to make it even better than their debut, and they still managed to not sound out of place from what we had already heard from the band. If I were to rate this album, I'd probably rate it 7 out of 10. And like their previous album, Famous Last Words was yet another success for Hedley, peaking number 3 on the Canadian singles chart and being certified platinum by the CRIA. It would also earn a nomination for Album of the Year at the 2009 Junos. Unfortunately, it lost to Dark Horse by Nickelback. And of course, what's a new album without a new tour? Unfortunately, Hedley's tour to headline Famous Last Words, which was originally supposed to start in November 2007, had to be postponed, because they were the supporting acts for the Canadian leg of Bon Jovi's Lost Highway tour from November 14th to December 16th. I mean, hey, what better artist to be a supporting act for than one of the most famous rock bands of all time? Hedley would eventually reschedule their headline tour for Famous Last Words in 2008, which took place from January 17th to February 20th in 20 locations across Canada, with fellow Canadian rock band State of Shock as the opening act. By the way, besides the songs from Famous Last Words, there was one more Hedley song that came out in 2007 that I'm not quite sure where to place. The song is called Alice in Wonderland Afraid, which was actually made for Famous Last Words, but didn't make the final cut for the track list. Despite not making the album, the song was released in 2007, presumably around the same time as the album itself. I couldn't find an exact release date beyond the year 2007, though it was never sent to radio or really got any promotion, so I can't exactly call it a single. It's more like a standalone B-side. Heck, even Spotify labels it as a B-side. If you're wondering, the song is fine. It's a rock song about a girl falling for someone, but the protagonist is afraid of pursuing the relationship because of what the girl might see in them and not like if they do hook up. Also, the first verse has the line, "I've got you living in a fairy tale, it's killing me," which I guess is why the song's title is a pun on the Disney movie and is possibly the name of the girl who's falling for the protagonist. According to Chris Crippen, the song's title was actually named after a real girl named Allison who ended up taking her own life. Crippen simply wanted to call the song Afraid. But now, let's talk about a song that did make the tracklist for Famous Last Words, the second single released from it, For the Nights I Can't Remember.
I do wanna love you if you see me running back.
For the Nights I Can't Remember was released in November 2007 and is considered to be one of Hedley's fan favorite songs. I already spoke about the song in the My Favorite Canadian Songs That Americans Have Never Heard video, so you can check that video out to hear my thoughts on it. However, I'll say two new things here. First of all, this song is sort of Hedley's equivalent to It Ends Tonight by the All-American Rejects, the song that showed that this pop-punk/pop rock band was capable of making a really heartfelt piano-driven power ballad too. It actually sort of reminds me of Hogarth's performance of Aerosmith's I Don't Want to Miss a Thing on Canadian Idol.
Cause if falling for you, girl, is crazy, then I'm going out of my mind. So hold back your tears this time. Even when I dream of you, the sweetest dream will never do. I still miss you, baby. Don't wanna miss a thing.
Secondly, going back to what I mentioned about Famous Last Words' second single sounding like a high school love song they hear at prom, this song was actually written about Tammy Hogarth, lead singer Jacob Hogarth's then wife, who was actually his high school girlfriend that he married in 2004 after being on Canadian Idol. The song is an apology to her, as being a rising musician made it difficult to juggle being on the road with being a husband and not being there, thus making him sorry for the nights he can't remember, but insisting he still loves her and trying to do what it takes to prove his commitment. Though, unfortunately, Jacob and Tammy would end up divorcing in 2009. Anyway, For the Nights I Can't Remember was a big hit in early 2008, peaking number 6 on the Canadian Hot 100, number 14 on the 2008 Canadian Year in Hot 100 list, number 1 on the Much Music Countdown, and was the number 9 most played song on Canadian radio in 2008. Its music video was nominated for 4 awards at the 2008 MMVAs: Best Video, Best Cinematography, Best Director, and People's Choice, Favorite Canadian Group, winning all of them except the latter. The song itself won 3 awards at the 2009 Canadian Radio Music Awards for Fans' Choice, Song of the Year, and Chart Topper Award, as well as Pop/Rock Music Award at the 2009 SOCAN Awards. The song stands out for being one of the 2 songs on Famous Last Words that doesn't have the pop-punk sound the rest of the album had. And wouldn't you know it, the other song from the album that falls into that category would end up being released as the album's 3rd single. I guess you could say it's Never Too Late.
You know it's never too late. Get up and start all over again.
Never Too Late was released as a single in April 2008, with its music video dropping on the 8th. Like I said, this is one of the 2 songs on Famous Last Words that stands out for not being a hard-hitting pop-punk/pop rock song like the rest of the album. Instead, Never Too Late is more of a ska song, with its brighter electric guitar, softer melody, and emphasis on walking bass and metallic percussion. It does quite remind me of a lot of the ska punk that was popular during the late 90s, even if it came out 10 years later. It's a very different sound from what people had heard from Hedley up to this point, but honestly, they can pull it off. It does sound very nice, and as a ska punk song, I honestly think it's great. It still manages to be upbeat, but in a different way from their pop-punk ragers. It reminds me quite a bit of Saturday from Hedley's debut album, but honestly, this song might be even better. The softer but still upbeat sound manages to fit perfectly with the encouraging, optimistic lyrics about picking yourself back up after a breakup. After all, it's never too late. Just get up and start all over again with someone new, and find a way to smile again. It sort of brands itself as an optimistic post-breakup song, especially with the pre-chorus saying, "Here's to all the broken hearts tonight, here's to all the fall-aparts tonight, here's to every girl and boy who lost their joy." That optimism also shines through with the happy, upbeat ska punk sound that makes it feel like a summery beach song. And not surprisingly, this song actually was a summer hit, peaking at number 4 on the Canadian Hot 100 during the summer of 2008, number 23 on the year-end Canadian Hot 100 list, and yet another number 1 on the Much Music Countdown. It managed to be an even bigger hit, at least in Canada, than fellow Canadian rock band 3 Days Grace's song of the same name from the year prior. Hedley would also go on to perform this song at the 2008 MMVAs, the second award show they performed at that year, after performing at the Junos on April 6. By the way, Never Too Late's music video is a shot-for-shot remake of that of Duran Duran's Rio. As easy as it is to claim it's unoriginal, I do feel like it's paying homage as opposed to ripping it off. Plus, I do still feel like the beat and yacht scenes fit with the song's summery sound, even more so than Rio in my opinion. Said music video also ended up being the most played music video in Canada in 2008. Headley themselves would also be the second most played artist on the radio in Canada that year, just behind Rihanna. The day after the 2008 MMVAs, Headley kicked off yet another tour, or perhaps the second leg of their tour that began in January. This time, it lasted until August 15th, taking place in 22 locations across Canada. Around the time this tour ended, Headley ended up releasing the fourth single from Famous Last Words, Old School. Old School was released in August 2008 according to Wikipedia, and man, I am very glad this was chosen to be a single, as it's one of the best songs from Famous Last Words. It's a nostalgia song about a group of friends getting together near their old school one weekend to drink and reminisce on their past memories. It's a very nice sounding song. I like how it starts out with an acoustic guitar before the electric guitar and drums come in. It's also got a great melody that gives me the imagery of someone playing guitar at dusk, perhaps next to a fire, perfectly fitting with the lyrics. It's not really clear if this old school is a grade school or maybe a secondary school. The first verse mentions remembering fires and burning car tires, so I don't imagine this was an elementary school. Not to mention, the second verse mentions growing up into men, putting out fires, and changing car tires, which gives me the impression it's sung from the perspective of someone either in their late teens or an adult. No one under 16 is going to be changing a car tire, and fire burning makes me think of a youth group around a fire, or perhaps having a frat party. Perhaps this group of people is visiting their old school because they're about to graduate from their current school and are looking back on their past, or because they haven't seen each other in years after going their separate ways and decided that visiting their old school to have a beer or two was the perfect way to reconnect and reminisce. Despite being sung from the perspective of someone older than the high schooler perspective on songs like Narcissist or For the Nights I Can't Remember, a high school senior of the youngest, its lyrical content still doesn't feel out of place from that aforementioned high school/young adult perspective. This is probably the most lyrically complex song on the album, and for that, it's definitely one of the album's best. It would go on to peak at number 10 on the Canadian Hot 100, making Headley's only time to have 3 singles from the same album hit the top 10, and number 61 on the 2008 Canadian Year-End Hot 100 list. Also, Headley would end up performing this song on the Season 6 finale of Canadian Idol, which will also end up being the series finale of Canadian Idol. It's pretty poetic for Hogarth to do one last performance on the show that kickstarted his career before said show ended. Those 3 top 10 singles from Famous Last Words would later earn Headley a Juno nomination for Songwriter of the Year at the 2009 Junos. Unfortunately, they lost to City and Colour. Headley themselves would also be nominated for Fan Choice Award at that year's Junos too, which they also lost, this time to Nickelback. Oh, by the way, just like with Group of the Year, I'm gonna get this out of the way now. Headley would be nominated for that same award 7 more times between 2011 and 2018 and would not win any of those times. Headley would, however, end up presenting the award for Group of the Year at the 2009 Junos. Shame they weren't nominated that year. It would have been funny if they had won and presented the award to themselves. On September 27, 2008, Headley began touring yet again, this time lasting until November 16th, in 28 locations across Canada. Around the time that tour ended, the 5th and final single from Famous Last Words was released. Dying to Live Again was released in November 2008, according to Wikipedia. It's a decent pop rock song about wanting to change after wronging an ex-partner and make up for the mistakes made to ex-partner and asking for a second chance. Again, it fits with most of the rest of the album by being about a relationship and owning up to past mistakes. I do like the guitar solo right after the first chorus. Not quite as hard-hitting as the one on She's So Sorry, but it's still decent. The key change on the bridge also makes the song stand out and makes it sound more heroic, which definitely fits the lyrical content. It's a shame it didn't keep that key change for the rest of the song. It reverts back to the original key just before the final chorus. It's still a decent song though. Unfortunately, this was the lowest performing single from Famous Last Words, only peaking at number 54 on the Canadian Hot 100 and, like their previous single, not getting a music video. On May 12, 2009, Headley's second album was released in the United States. However, the US's version of the album is noticeably different from Canada's version. First of all, the title of the album is not Famous Last Words, it's Never Too Late. The album cover has a blue background instead of red, and it has a completely new track list. This new track list contains 8 songs from the Canadian version of the album, as well as 5 tracks from Headley's self-titled debut album. By the way, In some countries, including Australia, shout out to my sister again, Never Too Late was released in lieu of their first 2 albums, meaning that this was their debut album in those places. It sort of reminds me of a couple of groups whose debut album in the United States was just a compilation of songs from their first 2 albums released internationally. Regardless, this means that in some parts of the world, these 4 tracks from Famous Last Words and/or these 6 tracks from their debut album are not legally available. I'm not going to go over the availability of every Hedley song or album in every country of the world in this video, I just figured this was worth mentioning. This actually won't be the last time a different version of one of their albums was released worldwide instead of the version released in Canada. The only place where all of their songs can officially be listened to is their home country of Canada, although you can find unofficial uploads of these missing songs on YouTube, so if you live in Australia and want to listen to Johnny Falls or Dear Blank, you still can. Anyway, Famous Last Words was yet another hit album for Hedley. 4 years since their breakout in 2005, and they had already earned the title of one of Canada's most popular artists. Would they continue to retain the title into 2009? Well, let's just see what they release next.
Hold back your tears this time. You scream when you're alone, even the beautiful lose control. Will you scream when you're alone? I got a burning need to know, no.
2 albums in, and Hedley was already at the top of their game. With the exception of possibly Nickelback, they were the biggest rock band from the Great White North at the time. No doubt they were making tons of money, and they were about to make even more. On August 17th, 2009, Hedley's lead single from their upcoming 3rd album was released to radio. With how much money the band was making, it's almost appropriate that their new single was called Cha-Ching.
So everybody dance and everybody sing. If you wanna go far, if you wanna be a star, yeah, we can swing it.
Cha-Ching is a song that's not what you think it is in the title. You'd expect it to be a song where Hedley brags about how much money they have and lean into that rockstar lifestyle by being smug and showing off their dollars. Instead, Cha-Ching is a satirical song about how reality shows are fabricated and how the people on them will do anything for money. The song's lyrics have a number of pop culture references in them. They reference brands such as MTV and Playboy, celebrities such as the Kardashians, Flavor Flav, and Mini-Me from the Austin Powers movies, and reality shows such as The Real World, Survivor, and The Idol shows. It's kind of funny they'd mock the latter, given that Jacob Hogarth was a contestant on Canadian Idol. To quote Hogarth,
"At first, when we came out with the song, a lot of people thought, oh, this doesn't make any sense. He's from reality TV. Why are they being such dicks?" And we weren't at all. It was more an observation on what people in this day and age are capable of and willing to do for fame and for fortune, much like I was.
Also,
it's essentially about how far you're willing to go for fame. At the same time, we're taking the piss out of ourselves. After all, we're trying to be famous. Satire makes it easier to maintain your grasp on reality.
Cha-Ching is definitely a song that feels like it came out in 2009. Reality shows, like all the ones referenced in the song, were definitely very popular at the time. And it's definitely an open secret that reality shows often don't portray reality as much as they seem. The song really hammers in the phoniness of reality TV and how much money the people on the shows make, willing to lie and put on fake personas just to get rich. Thankfully though, it doesn't insult the show contestants or the people who watch them. It just has fun with itself and almost seems to endorse this lifestyle in an ironic way on the chorus. The song really feels like an attempt to make a song for American audiences, given that most of the pop culture references originate from America, and the bridge even references the all-American dream. By the way, it's kind of funny that Hogarth said TMZ instead of TMZ, given that he's Canadian, but then again, I guess it wouldn't have rhymed with free. Unfortunately, this song did not cross over to America. In Canada though, it was a big hit, peaking number 6 on the Canadian Hot 100, number 58 on the 2009 Canadian Year-End Hot 100 list, number 93 on the 2010 Year-End list, and number 1 on the Much Music Countdown. Its music video was also nominated for Pop Video of the Year at the 2010 MMVAs, and it won! I'm certainly happy the song did so well because it's another banger Hedley single. While it's lyrically quite different from any song Hedley had made at this point and ever would in the future, it's pretty cleverly written. Not to mention they really do pull off the right sound for it with the pop-punk frolic of the guitars, upbeat catchy melody, and Hogarth's raspy punk vocals. One thing's for certain, this song gave Hedley more cha-ching. 2 months later, Hedley gave their fans another taste of their upcoming 3rd studio album, and a good lesson with the song's title, Don't Talk to Strangers.
Don't talk to strangers. Don't do all the thinking we are at all.
Don't Talk to Strangers was released on October 27, 2009, and man, Headley sure knows how to make fun, catchy pop-punk music because, just like Cha-Ching, that's just what we get with Don't Talk to Strangers. You ever enter into a relationship knowing it's a bad idea and knowing the outcome won't be good, but you do it anyway? That's exactly what this song is about. It's a song about falling in love with a middle-aged woman who, despite being much older than the protagonist, he just can't help but make love to anyway. But he still recalls the advice his mother gave him as a child about not talking to strangers and using better judgment to avoid a bad situation. You could argue it's irresponsible, but the song isn't outright saying to disobey your parents' advice or enter into a dangerous situation. It's more so leaning into that rock star image and being naughty but in a fun way. Maybe it hasn't really aged the best, mostly because being attracted to someone who's almost twice your age, as described on the bridge, is definitely a bit off-putting, especially when the song implies that they had sex and that she has a son who goes to school with the protagonist. But I don't think you're supposed to think that deep about it. I guess this is like the sequel to Stacy's Mom by Fountains of Wayne, where the protagonist actually gets together with Stacy's mom. Plus, when the song has that catchy melody, those rockin' punk guitars, those strings in the final chorus, and Hogarth's raspy but expressive voice, which again fits the song perfectly, how can you hate it? I will say that I'm not a fan of Hogarth's faux rapping on the bridge of the song, especially when it's repeated with that off-putting screaming voice, but that's a minor problem. And this song ended up being yet another hit for Headley, peaking at number 11 on the Canadian Hot 100, number 54 on the 2010 Canadian Year-End Hot 100 list, and number 1 on the Much Music Countdown. Would the album these songs are on be just as good or be as much of a hit? Well, on November 17th, 2009, Canada would find out, as Headley's third studio album, The Show Must Go, was released. The album contains 11 tracks, plus one bonus track exclusively available on iTunes and Apple Music, or 2 if you'd pre-order the album on iTunes. The album was produced by Brian Howes, Dave Genn, Dave Bendith, who was previously a producer for bands like Vertical Horizon, SR71, Breaking Benjamin, Paramore, and All Time Low, and John Feldman, frontman of the band Goldfinger. About 50 total songs were written for the album, which of course had to be greatly narrowed down. Many of the songs that were cut were piano or acoustic ballads. The album's title, The Show Must Go, was actually the name of a cut song from the album that had a slow tempo. This was Headley's first album to be released after Hogarth's divorce from his ex-wife Tammy, which actually does explain why so many slow songs were written for the album. It definitely reflected the emotions Hogarth was feeling at the time.
It got really difficult for a 21-year-old guy to be a 31-year-old guy while being in his band, and it just was ill-fated, I guess, and it became really difficult to live 2 different lives, and that can really wear you down. It's quite eroding, and I really got to a point where I was like, alright, well the show must go.
Despite many of the slow songs being cut, listening to the songs that actually made it onto the album, this is easily Headley's slowest album so far. With a couple of exceptions, their first 2 albums were pretty upbeat from start to finish. The Show Must Go, on the other hand, contains a number of ballads. In fact, about a third of the songs on The Show Must Go can be considered either ballads or mid-tempo. I definitely wouldn't call this album boring, the ballads here are definitely better than Gunnin', but it definitely does restrain itself from being too loud or rock-sounding. Those of you who loved Headley's raging punk rock sound from songs like Villain and She's So Sorry are gonna be disappointed. Don't Talk to Strangers is the closest you'll get to that here. The Show Must Go has a much heavier emphasis on acoustic guitar than their previous 2 albums did. All of the album's ballads could be considered to be acoustic ballads or piano ballads, or in the case of Amazing, a bit of both. In fact, the acoustic ballads on here almost sound like campfire songs. They give me the feeling of a youth group going on a camping trip, sitting around a fire at night, and one of the guys strumming his guitar and singing. These include one of the album's singles, which I'll mention later, plus Friends, the final song on the album, which, no, is not the theme song for the NBC sitcom of the same name. I really like the pedal steel on that song. It gives the song almost a country sound, at least the closest Headley have ever made to a country song. I can definitely imagine a group of friends singing that song around a campfire in a desert at night. I would have preferred some hand clapping percussion to really sell that imagery, but it still sounds nice regardless. While there are definitely still elements of Headley's pop-punk/pop rock sound here, most notably with the album's first 2 singles, which are also the first 2 tracks on the album, in general, this album feels like a bit of a step away from that sound, and a bit more of an attempt to showcase a softer, gentler sound to them. To be fair, Headley can pull that sound off. Jacob Hogarth is a very versatile singer. If his performances from songs from various genres and eras on Canadian Idol were anything to go off of, he definitely can pull off a more gentle John Mayer or Ed Sheeran-esque acoustic singer sort of performance. Plus, this slight pivot in sound isn't super jarring or out of place for Headley up to this point, although it is more of a difference in sound for them compared to their last 2 albums than the brighter, less angsty high schooler perspective of Famous Last Words was compared to their debut album. Don't worry though, those of you who want to hear more upbeat pop rock songs will still get that here, just not quite in the same quantity you got the last 2 times. In addition to the aforementioned first 2 singles/tracks, Scream is a pretty upbeat pop rock song about being in love with someone and asking if they'll scream when they're alone. In addition to that song, Headley Hedley's characteristic pop-punk sound also peeks through in songs like Young and Stupid and 9 Shades of Red, with the guitars, Hogarth's vocals, and the lyrical content. Also, 9 Shades of Red is an absolute banger of a song about going out for a night in the town with your friends to get rowdy and have some fun. In fact, it may just be my favorite song on the album. Also, if you want to count the 2 iTunes bonus tracks, Lucky is a pretty upbeat song too. Shelter is the one song in here that fits perfectly in the middle between the upbeat songs and the ballads. It sort of sounds both upbeat and slow at the same time. If it wasn't for the electric guitars and drums, it probably would have fitted perfectly with the acoustic ballads, especially when the tempo slows down at the end of the song and the lyrics about caring for someone and being their shelter. At the same time though, those electric guitars and drums combined with its mid-tempo sound makes it sound more upbeat. Goodbye, the other iTunes bonus track, also fits in the middle as well, although I'm actually glad that song didn't make the standard edition, as it reminds me a bit too much of a certain song that actually did make the standard edition that I'll talk about shortly. On some level, this song could be seen as a bit of a step towards pop. Despite previously being twice nominated for Pop Video of the Year of the MMVAs, their music was still generally pop-punk or pop-rock, and most people at this point would be comfortable calling Hedley a rock band. While this album didn't eradicate or disprove that label or anything, compared to their first 2 albums, it does soften their sound a bit and contains sub-poppier elements to it. One such element is the faux rapping on the bridge of Don't Talk to Strangers, which does sort of remind me of a rapper doing a rap verse on the bridge of a pop song as a featured artist. You'll also hear a couple of vocal effects and a few electronic synths and beats here and there, which we definitely didn't hear at all in their first 2 albums. It's also worth noting that this is Hedley's first album in which all 4 members of the band weren't involved with writing every song. Cha-Ching is one of only 2 songs from Hedley's entire discography that wasn't written by any of the members of Hedley, being written entirely by Brian Howes. Meanwhile, on their first 2 albums, all 4 members are credited as songwriters for every song. On The Show Must Go, however, there are only 7 songs in which all 4 members are credited as songwriters, which happen to be the only songs on the album that Rosen, Mac, or Crippen have any hand in writing. Jacob Hogarth, meanwhile, had a hand in writing 10 of the album's songs, and he even wrote 1 song completely by himself without any other songwriters. So far, this was a Hedley album which the 3 instrument players in the band had the least involvement with, at least creatively. Regardless, The Show Must Go was another successful album for Hedley, peaking number 6 on the Canadian Albums Chart, and getting certified 2 times platinum by the CRIA. The album would later be nominated for Pop Album of the Year of the 2010 Juno Awards. Pop Album of the Year. Keep that in mind. Unfortunately, it lost to Crazy Love by Michael Bublé. The album was also nominated for simply Album of the Year at the 2011 Juno Awards, but it again lost, this time to The Suburbs by Arcade Fire. The new decade would continue to bring Hedley success and notoriety. On February 28, 2010, Hedley were one of several Canadian artists to perform at the closing ceremony of the 2010 Winter Olympics, held in Vancouver. Kinda poetic actually, given that Hedley is actually from Vancouver. They performed Cha-Ching, the aforementioned first single from The Show Must Go. By this time though, Hedley had already released the album's 3rd single, and hey, what better song to impress listeners than the one titled Perfect?
I'm not perfect, but I keep trying.
Perfect was released to Canadian radio on February 8, 2010. In this song, Hogarth really brings out his Canadian Idol side, and just like with For the Nights I Can't Remember, makes a heartfelt piano-driven power ballad. Unlike For the Nights I Can't Remember though, the lyrical sentiment is a bit different. Perfect is a song about not being perfect, but owning up to your mistakes and trying to better yourself. That's a pretty good message, and I gotta say, it definitely does sound sincere. It is a song about striving to be better, and not simply saying, I'm sorry I messed up. There is some genuine maturity here, and it's nice to hear. I have a strong feeling that Jacob wrote the song about his relationship with Tammy, like For the Nights I Can't Remember, and many of the cut songs from The Show Must Go. Also, I really like Jacob dipping into his falsetto in the chorus. He actually has a really good falsetto, one you wouldn't expect a pop-punk/pop rock singer to have. It's no wonder he finished 3rd on Canadian Idol. He's a really great singer. Just like the first 2 singles from The Show Must Go, Perfect was yet another top 20 hit for Hedley, peaking number 7 on the Canadian Hot 100, number 18 on the 2010 Canadian Year in Hot 100 list, and number 1 on the Much Music Countdown. On the topic of Much Music, Hedley would end up performing the song at the 2010 MMVAs. And speaking of the 2010 MMVAs, the song's music video was nominated for 5 awards at that show. Video of the Year, which it won, Post-Production of the Year, which it won, Cinematography of the Year, Director of the Year, and Urfe Video, the latter 3 of which it lost. Said music video was also nominated for Video of the Year at the 2011 Juno Awards, and it won, becoming the first Juno win for Hedley themselves. The song itself, along with Cha-Ching, also earned Brian Howes another Juno nomination for Producer of the Year at the same award show, which he unfortunately lost to Daniel Lanois. The song also won a Pop/Rock Music Award at the 2011 SOCAN Awards, and was also nominated for Single of the Year at the 2011 Junos. Unfortunately, it lost to Waving Flag by Young Artists for Haiti. Speaking of which, Wavin' Flag by Young Artists for Haiti was a charity collaboration song released by a supergroup of Canadian artists on March 12, 2010. Like many other charity collaboration songs, it was a cover of a pre-existing song intended to raise money for a real-world cause. In this song's case, the magnitude 7 earthquake that hit Haiti 2 months prior. More than 50 Canadian artists lended their voices to the song, 26 of whom got solo parts. These soloists included Kanon, the artist of the original song, Nelly Furtado, Avril Lavigne, Lights, Fifi Dobson, Drake, Cardinal Offishall, Justin Bieber, Pierre Bouvier of Simple Plan, Derek Whibley of Sum 41, and Jacob Hogarth of Headley.
Love is the answer, that's what they say.
Hogarth may have only sung one solo line of the song, which lasted 3 seconds total, but it was still great that he can contribute and help all the people in Haiti who were affected by the earthquake. And this cover was a massive success, peaking number 1 on both the Canadian Hot 100 and Much Music Countdown, number 19 on the 2010 Canadian Year in Hot 100 list, and, as I mentioned, winning the 2011 Juno Award for Single of the Year. I guess you could say Headley didn't end up losing that Juno Award. Headley themselves would also win the Fans' Choice Award at the 2010 Canadian Radio Music Awards, held on the same day of Wavin' Flag's release. That spring, Headley launched the Show Must Go On The Road tour. The first leg of the tour lasted from March 22nd to April 20th, taking place in 20 cities across Canada, with fellow Canadian artists Fifi Dobson and Stereos as 2 of the supporting acts. Fellow pop-punk / pop-rock band Boys Like Girls also supported the tour from March 28th to April 10th, whereas Faber Drive supported the other 8 dates. That summer, a second leg of the tour occurred, lasting from June 30th to October 2nd in 21 cities across Canada. This time, fellow Canadian artists San Sebastian, Lights, and These Kids Wear Crowns were the supporting acts. In between the 2 legs of the tour, Headley would present the award for Rap Recording of the Year at the 2010 Junos, broadcasted on April 18th, 2010. If you're wondering, the winner was So Far Gone by Drake. Also, in late May 2010, Headley traveled to Masai Mara in Kenya to build schools as part of Free the Children's Me to We training trips. This was the second bit of notable charity work Headley was involved in, following Hogarth's performance on Wavin' Flag. Hogarth had previously built houses while working as an apprentice carpenter before Headley became a national name. Now, he was putting that to good use by building schools for kids in Africa. And that wouldn't be Hogarth's only involvement with Free the Children in 2010, as he would also end up participating in the We Day event in Toronto on September 30th. For those who don't know, We Day was a series of annual stadium-held events organized by Free the Children with the intent of educating kids about real-world issues, such as the environment, world hunger, and poverty. Headley themselves would also go on to be regular performers at these events in Canada, including on October 18, 2010 in their hometown of Vancouver, BC, November 23, 2011 in Winnipeg, Manitoba, September 28, 2010 in Toronto, October 24, 2012 in Calgary, Alberta, February 27, 2013 in Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan, October 18, 2013 in Vancouver, November 27, 2013 in Halifax, Nova Scotia, October 1, 2015 in Toronto, October 21, 2015 in Vancouver, October 19, 2016 in Toronto, November 9, 2016 in Ottawa, Ontario, July 2, 2017 in Ottawa, and September 28, 2017 in Toronto. Anyway, jumping back to 2010, there were 2 more singles released from The Show Must Go after Perfect. Hands Up, released in August 2010, and Sweater Song, released on either November or December 2010 according to Wikipedia. Hands Up is a decent song that combines the pop-punk and acoustic sounds on the album about how you'll be okay as long as you're with your partner, and how you'll go crazy without them. It's a decent song, and I will say the minor key melody does make it stand out a little more. Also, maybe it's the underlying acoustic guitar and hand drum and hand clap percussion, fitting with the song's title. Maybe it's the first verse with the line, "I'm floating down a river where I don't belong," but this song sounds like a song that would have been performed outside, like at a summer camp or something. Of course, Sweater Song, the 5th and final single, sounds even more like a song that would be sung outside. Along with Friends, it's one of the 2 songs from The Show Must Go that really sounds like a campfire song. It's a very gentle acoustic ballad with a very nice sound and sweet lyrics about a boy and a girl both mutually missing each other that honestly sounds like an Ed Sheeran song. The first verse is about the boy leaving despite the girl not wanting her to go, but before he leaves, they each give each other a piece of their clothing, so the other will have something to remember them by. The second verse is about them talking over the phone and saying that they both miss each other and are still wearing the piece of clothing the other gave to them. And the third verse is about the boy coming back and him playing a song he wrote for her while she was gone before they make love to each other. Between the soft, pleasant melody of the acoustic guitar, the tambourine on the chorus, the harmonization on the chorus, and second and third verses, the fact that the song is sung in the third person, with the stanzas of the verses alternating between starting with he or she, and the chorus just being a bunch of na-na sounds, it really does give me the feeling of a song that could be played by a small group around a campfire. I can just imagine a guy playing this song near a campfire with his girlfriend sitting next to him wearing a sweater as described in the song. I definitely have a soft spot for songs that give me that campfire song imagery. Even when the song suddenly gets louder with an electric guitar and real drums in the final chorus, it doesn't sound out of place from the rest of the song and still sounds just as sweet. That definitely makes it the best ballad of the album, and possibly the sweetest song Hedley have ever made. Neither of these songs were quite as successful as the first 3 singles from The Show Must Go, unfortunately. They peaked at number 27 and number 60 on the Canadian Hot 100 respectively, and the former also managed to just barely squeeze onto the 2010 year-end Canadian Hot 100 list at number 96. Perhaps due to not being as successful as the first 3 singles, neither of these last 2 singles got music videos. On October 4th, 2010, 2 days after the second leg of The Show Must Go On The Road tour ended, Hedley launched yet another tour, this time in the USA, taking place until December 17th in 14 American cities. Speaking of the USA, The Show Must Go was eventually released in America on October 12, 2010, under Island Records. Just like their first 2 albums' American releases, it had a brand new album cover, and just like their second album's American release, it had a completely new track list, containing 9 of the 11 songs from the Canadian edition, plus 2 new songs, Color Outside the Lines and I Do Wanna Love You, the latter of which is basically just a new version of For the Nights I Can't Remember, but it's in 4/4 time, has a couple of the lyrics changed, and has more of a reggae sound to it.
And I do wanna love you. See me running back.
By the way, on a side note, Spotify says that the original Canadian version of the album is the international version, and implies the American version is the original version. They got those backwards. Anyway, that wraps it up for The Show Must Go, but before I move on, Hedley had 2 more releases in 2010. First off, we have iTunes Sessions, an iTunes exclusive EP released back on April 20th, featuring performances of 8 songs from their first 3 albums.
Falling for you, girl, is crazy. I'm going out of my mind. So hold back your tears this time. I'm not perfect, but I keep trying. 'Cause that's what I said I would do from the start.
It's fine, I guess. Just like their Orange Lounge live EP from 4 years before, it is pretty obvious that the performances of these songs were each done in one start-to-finish recording in the studio, and thus lack the polish that studio albums typically have. Again, unless you're a hardcore Hedley fan, you can skip this EP. Not to mention that there was a certain other Hedley release in 2010, featuring performances of songs from their first 3 albums, each done in a single recording, that would end up stealing the spotlight, and... well, let's talk about that.
I'm not perfect, but I keep trying.
We are Hedley and we have such a show for you tonight. Let's go!
So far in their career, Hedley had released 3 studio albums, plus a handful of miscellaneous releases. Throughout their entire career, Hedley never released any one-off singles or soundtrack singles, or a rarities or B-side compilation, or a greatest hits compilation, or a remix album. However, there was one album Hedley did release during their career that doesn't fall into any of those aforementioned categories, and that was their first and only live album, Go With The Show. Go With The Show was released on November 9th, 2010. The album features 17 tracks, all of which are live performances of Hedley songs from the final 3 locations of the first leg of The Show Must Go On The Road tour. 7 of them were from their April 15th show in Moncton, New Brunswick, 8 were from their April 16th show in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and 3 were from their April 20th show in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. The performances included on the album include all the singles from their first 2 albums, barring Villain, Street Fight, and Dying to Live Again, as well as all the singles from The Show Must Go, and 3 more non-singles from that album. There's also the song Beautiful, which was never featured on any prior Hedley album, and is the one original song from Go With The Show. I said this before, but I'm not really a fan of live releases. I'm not much of a concert goer either. I always prefer to listen to albums at home. Sure, seeing an artist in person at a concert is cool, but for a number of reasons, ranging from having to pay for expensive tickets to live performances almost always being inferior to the studio version, I'll always prefer to listen to the studio albums at home rather than going to concerts. I have nothing against live albums or anything, and I'll definitely say that Go With The Show is better than the Orange Lounge live EP from 2006. They didn't tone down the rock sound like they did on there, but live albums, for me at least, are definitely one of those listen to only once sorts of albums. When it comes to Go With The Show, it's got got some of the same issues I had with the Orange Lounge Live EP or iTunes sessions, lacking the polish of studio versions and obviously being done in one take. Not to mention that there's cheering throughout all the tracks, as you'd hear at pretty much any concert. The issue of being done in one take definitely bites a few of these recordings in the butt. For example, on the performance of Cha-Ching, Hogarth frequently sounds like he's trying to catch his breath, and he actually does catch his breath a few times in the performance of Don't Talk to Strangers, and thus misses a few words. This is probably because he was jumping around and or dancing on stage, which caused him to lose his breath. Also, he messed up on the first verse of She's So Sorry's performance. He's saying, "You made a mess before, I kept coming back for more," both in the first verse and the second verse, but that's only a line from the second verse. He should have said, "For all we could have found," just to let it hit the ground on the first verse. I definitely prefer his live performances from Canadian Idol as opposed to this album. Also, this isn't a detriment per se, but just like with the aforementioned Orange Lounge Live and iTunes Sessions EPs, a few of these recordings are in different keys from the original studio versions. In fact, the new key for the Nights I Can't Remember is the same one that they used for not only the iTunes Sessions recording of that song, but also for I Do Wanna Love You, the remade version of that song for the international version of The Show Must Go. On the more positive side of things, I do like how each track transitions into the next, even among the consecutive tracks on the album that were performed at different locations. It gives the illusion that all the tracks were performed at one show. Also, credit to Jacob Hogarth for holding out that last note for so long on the performance of For the Nights I Can't Remember. I said it before, but he is a genuinely great singer. Also, if you're wondering what I think of Beautiful, the sole original song from the album, it's pretty decent. Just like Sweater Song or Friends, it's another acoustic ballad, and one that definitely feels like a leftover track from The Show Must Go. Lyrically, it's a song about how beautiful a girl is, but rather than being a love song about how much the protagonist loves a girl, it's sung in the third person, and the girl isn't the one being spoken to, or sung to I should say, in the song. That plus lines like, "Isn't she everything you need?" or "Make you laugh, she'll make you listen," imply that the protagonist is talking about their friend's girlfriend or crush, not their own. It's also a very simple song with only 2 verses, each 4 lines long, and a chorus that's also only 4 lines long, consisting of 2 repeated lines, and a bridge consisting of just held out yeah and ooh sounds. I also really love the harmonization on the chorus and second verse. It's honestly some of the best harmonization I've ever heard from Hedley. By the way, I like how at the end of the recording for Friends, the track right before Beautiful, Hogarth says, "Why don't we play something no one's ever heard before?" and then he introduces the song before the band performs it. I'm sure the people in Halifax who saw the April 16th show live were ecstatic to hear that brand new song and be the first Hedley fans to ever hear it. By the way, I find it a little weird that in the performance of Never Too Late, Hogarth says this is the last part of the last song and wishes the audience goodnight on it, even though there's still 3 more tracks after it on the album. They probably should have gone with a different recording of that song from the tour for the album, especially since the actual final track, the performance of Sweater Song, is a much more fitting final track. After they finish the song, Hogarth thanks the audience for making the tour so amazing and asks them to sing along with them before the band does an encore performance of the chorus. That was definitely the perfect way to close out the album and the show. It was definitely fun to listen to the performances of these songs, but honestly, I'm not sure this is an album I'll go back to. If I'm gonna listen to any versions of these songs, it'll be the original studio versions. The physical version of Go With The Show also contains a DVD, featuring an exclusive documentary of Hedley during The Show Must Go On The Road tour. The documentary was directed by Hedley, Assam Naraini, who also edited it, and Stephen Barrell, who was also involved with the cinematography, camera operation, recording location sound, and additional editing. It was produced by Watchdog Management President Darren Gilmore and Sarah Fenton. The documentary mostly consists of the band members talking about their creative passions, their relationship with their fans and each other, and what it's like to live the rockstar life and be on the road touring, interspersed with footage from the tour.
Maybe this sounds weird, but I believe this. There's a certain amount of magic that's involved in creating music and creating a show and being in a band.
Constantly trying to make each other laugh and keep each other, happy. It's hard being on the road. It's you kind of sometimes feel like you're all alone, even though you're surrounded by people every day.
Something happened when this album came out that the band's always worked hard, blah blah blah. But for some reason, the focus and the excitement of how the record turned out, and everybody kind of had a really great focus.
There's something to be said of just about working your ass off and doing what you do the best you can, and it'll get you there. Just one foot in front of the other.
It's a fine documentary, nothing to write home about, but definitely worth a watch if you're a Hedley fan. Definitely a better Hedley DVD than Try This At Home. Just a warning that, like Try This At Home, there are a couple scenes with exposed butts. Nowhere near as much as that DVD, but viewer discretion is still advised, although it's certainly not quite as explicit as some of the stuff that happened on said previous DVD. Speaking of which, there are a few clips from Try This At Home played here as well. The documentary also contains 8 bonus features. These consist of the music videos for the first 3 singles from The Show Must Go, the Raw Jumbotron feed for the performances of Amazing, Beautiful, and Sweater Song that were used for Go With The Show, as well as 2 miscellaneous bonus features. There's Intro Vignettes, a short film that was played at the start of Hedley's shows on the tour, consisting of each of the members doing activities like playing golf, playing Operation, working as a butcher, and carving wood near a campfire, only to get a phone call and run to their tour bus where the 4 of them meet up, get into metal chess, and ride to the concert. There's also Newsroom, which is a comedy sketch where the members of Hedley play presenters for HTV News, all Hedley all the time. Hogarth and Crippen play news anchors, Mac plays a weatherman, and Rosin plays a news reporter near the Hedley concert.
Good evening, and thanks for tuning in to HTV. Do you mind? Good evening, and thanks for tuning in to HTV News, all Hedley all the time. I'm Chimney Cheroot.
And I'm Court Kerrigan.
Tonight's top story is an area man swallows 2 parrots and lives to tell about it 3 times.
There's 2 angry fowl who won't be bothering you for any cracker bills anytime soon.
I'm still waiting for an interview, and hopefully, oh wait, Jake, Mr. Hogarth, Bunny, wow, you've seen it here, folks, all kinds of craziness. Back to you, fellas.
This sort of reminds me of the 4 members of Hedley playing TV executives in the music video for Cha-Ching. I'll admit it's kind of a fun watch. It was actually used as the intro for the tour. I'm sure Hedley's fans watching the tour live would have gotten a kick out of it. It was also uploaded on Hedley's official YouTube channel 6.5 years later, in December 2016, along with Hedley's other tour intro videos for their next 3 studio albums tours. By the way, I know this isn't a very good transition, but I'm bringing this up now because there really isn't any better place I can mention this. Hedley would end up performing Perfect at the 2011 Junos on March 27th. Quite poetic that song's music video won Video of the Year at said show. Also in 2011, Hedley went on another trip to build schools as part of the Free the Children movement, this time in Rajasthan, India, marking their second school building trip with Free the Children after their trip to Kenya the year before. They ended up raising over $12,000 for health education in India thanks to their fans' donations. Now, those of you who have never heard of any of Hedley's music before watching this video might be wondering why I consider Hedley to be Canada's Maroon 5. From what I described about their music so far, they don't really seem to have much in common with Maroon 5. In fact, most of the artists I've compared Hedley and their music to so far have been other pop punk and pop rock bands, and Maroon 5 doesn't really fall into that category. Well, remember when I said about how The Show Must Go, Hedley's 3rd album, seemed to be a bit of a step towards pop? Well, some say the same about Maroon 5's 3rd album, Hands All Over. Maroon 5 often get labeled as sellouts due to the fact that they started off as more of a funk rock band in the mid-2000s, but slowly started making poppier music as time went on. Moves like Jagger is often cited as the beginning of Maroon 5's pivot towards pop. And, well, many Hedley fans say the same about some of the songs on The Show Must Go. Of course, we all know about how Maroon 5 would eventually go full on pop. What about Hedley, though? Well, let's take a look and see what their 4th studio album had in store.
I'm gonna make you come to life. And when you're there, you won't need to say your prayers, 'cause heaven's gonna wait for you.
The Show Must Go was the first sign of Hedley moving towards pop. The clouds of pop were moving in, and the pop winds were starting to pick up. And incoming clouds and increasing winds can only mean one thing. There's a storm incoming. A pop storm, if you will. On August 22nd, 2011, the storm began. Batten down the hatches because Hedley's new single had just been shipped to radio and to digital retailers the day after. Of course, nothing could stop this storm. You might say that the lead single from Hedley's 4th studio album was Invincible.
I've come a long, long way, made a lot of mistakes, but I'm breathing, that's right, and I made it.
Invincible is a song from Hedley that you could say is their official plunge into pop. If there's any song I can compare Invincible to, it would be Payphone by Maroon 5. It was the lead single from both bands' 4 studio albums, and both songs were a noticeable pivot away from both bands' original sound. Invincible is a pop rock song about re-examining one's life, attempting to stay strong, and overcoming the challenges of life, and being invincible. I will say, the song does pull off the image it's trying to go for quite well. It does make me think of a sailor trying to overcome an oncoming storm, even despite the approaching rain cloud and flashes of lightning. Heck, the first verse of the song even mentions a big black cloud and a stormy sky. The piano-driven instrumental and build-up to the chorus do make it feel empowering, which fits the song's lyrics. It's not going for the loving power ballad sound that For the Nights I Can't Remember was, but rather a tone of weathering, no pun intended, the storm ahead and keeping your boat afloat, even when it feels like you're sinking. It's definitely a stray away from the pop-punk sound Hedley had established, just like how Payphone was a stray away from the funk rock sound Maroon 5 had established. Also, just like Payphone, Invincible was also the band's first song to have a rapper on the bridge. Whereas Payphone had Wiz Khalifa, Invincible had P. Rain.
Jesus peace, I swarm of stones. I rose from the ashes covered in gold. Yeah, realized I live a lie cause I fear the truth. Yeah, my son asked if there's a God, said I'm living proof.
I'm sure many Americans have never heard of P. Rain. Some Canadians, however, might recognize him from also featuring on the song Alone Again by Alyssa Reed, another song that became popular in 2011. The version of Invincible I always knew though was the album version without P. Rain. But anyway, Invincible continued the Show Must Go's plunge into a slightly softer sound and away from the more rock and punk sounds that defined them on their first two albums. I don't think just because it's popular than the previous sound automatically makes it bad though. I think it's a good song, although I get why fans of pop punk music who enjoyed the first two albums might be put off by it. It seemed though the pop fans weren't put off by it. It peaked at number 9 on the Canadian Hot 100, number 1 on the Much Music Countdown, number 69 and 97 on the 2011 and 2012 Canadian Hot 100 year list respectively, and was certified 2 times platinum by the CRIA, which had now changed its name to Music Canada, and was even nominated for Single of the Year at the 2012 Juno Awards, although it lost to I Don't Know by the Sheepdogs. It did, however, win a Pop/Rock Music Award at the 2012 SOCAN Awards. The song's music video was also nominated for 4 different categories of the 2012 MMVAs: Video of the Year, Pop Video of the Year, Cinematography of the Year, and Fade Video of the Year, although it didn't win any of them. This was their 3rd nomination for Pop Video of the Year, which was certainly fitting, as it was clear that Hedley was definitely heading in a pop direction now. Certainly whatever they put out next would only prove that further. That proof came in the form of Hedley's follow-up single to Invincible, One Life.
It's a great big world and you'll see it could pass you by in light speed. You got one life, don't stop living up.
One Life was released on October 24, 2011, as a pre-order track from Hedley's upcoming 4th studio album. Like Invincible, One Life is a pop rock song with a more mainstream-friendly sound to it. It's a song about how you shouldn't sit down and let the world pass you by. It's a big world out there, so you should get up and live it up. After all, you only got one life, so make the most of it and enjoy it while you can. So yeah, the song's message is basically YOLO. Funny enough, this song actually came out around the same time as the song that actually popularized the phrase YOLO. It actually managed to outperform that song in Canada, despite both Drake and Hedley being Canadian artists. But getting back to One Life, it's a pretty decent pop rock song, though not quite as strong as Invincible. It also has quite a bit of modern production, with the stuttering vocal effect on Hogarth's voice on the verses, the processing on his voice at the end of the chorus and bridge, and the synths that give the song more of a techno feel to it. The electronic elements do fit with the songs that tend to sound more upbeat, but it also makes it the most processed song they have released up to this point, and definitely their poppiest. However, it was yet another hit for Hedley, peaking at number 16 on the Canadian Hot 100, number 57 on the 2012 Billboard Year-End Canadian Hot 100 list, number 1 on the Much Music Countdown, and was certified platinum by Music Canada. Just like Hedley's previous single, it would also win a Pop/Rock Music Award at the 2014 SOCAN Awards. Canadian listeners had just gotten a taste of Hedley's pivot in sound, but on November 8th, 2011, they got to hear it in full, as their 4th studio album, Storms, was released. The album contains 11 tracks, or 14 on the deluxe edition, or 15 if you pre-order it on iTunes. One of the album's tracks was actually a studio version of Beautiful, the sole original song on Go With The Show. The album was produced by Brian Howes, John Feldman, and Jacob Hogarth, making it the first album in which Hogarth had a hand in the production. Howes and Hogarth, along with a few other songwriters, wrote the album's songs. I mentioned earlier that we used to own Famous Last Words on CD in our house. Well, we actually still own Storms on CD in our house. My sister left behind a lot of her CDs when she moved out. Anyway, with Storms, Hedley had officially sailed their ship into pop waters. Hedley's mateys had to either say ahoy to the poppier sound or abandon ship. Some Hedley fans did indeed choose the latter. Just like how some Maroon 5 fans said the same of that band when they put out Overexposed, Hedley was now starting to face selling out accusations too, according to their fans who walked the plank. It was starting to become clear that they were leaving their pop punk sound behind them. I mean, it was 2011, and pretty much nobody cared about pop punk anymore by that point. With that in mind, why not get as much booty as they could by sailing to Pop Island and finding a hidden treasure chest full of money? Storms can be considered Hedley's equivalent to Maroon 5's Overexposed. Now, I wouldn't say Storms plays it completely safe or abruptly switches to a generic pop sound. I'd still consider most of the songs on here to be pop rock. This is especially evident when you have a song like Young referencing banging our heads to AC/DC on the chorus, or the power ballad-esque songs on here, including the aforementioned Invincible or Heaven's Gonna Wait, the latter of which is one of my favorite songs on the album. It has an even more powerful crescendo than Invincible and feels just as uplifting. Of course, you will still hear occasional elements of pop or electronic music on here, such as the aforementioned stuttering vocal sound on One Life, which is also present on Young, the processing on Hogarth's voice at the end of the chorus of One Life, which you'll also hear at the end of Last Call, the new wave sounding synthesizer on Hot Mess, and the futuristic spaceship laser sound at the very end of I Won't Let You Go, Darling. This is also the Hedley album that uses the most piano. I don't think their debut album had any piano on it at all, whereas their second and third albums each had one notable piano ballad released as a single. Meanwhile, quite a few of the songs on Storms use piano as their primary instrument. Invincible, Heaven's Gonna Wait, I Won't Let You Go, Darling. Even one of the deluxe edition tracks, Hiding Place, utilizes piano as the bassline instrument, with guitars, bass, and drums overtop most of the songs. By the way, I Won't Let You Go, Darling is the longest song Hedley have ever made, at 8 minutes and 28 seconds long. That's only 8 seconds shorter than Don McLean's American Pie. It feels kind of poetic that it's the last song on the album, but I will admit the song does drag on for a bit longer than it needs to. It's not incredibly tedious, it's still a nice song, it's just a bit dragged out, kind of like the From the Vault version of All Too Well by Taylor Swift. In addition to piano, another instrument, or instrument group I should say, that gets a heavier usage on Storms compared to Hedley's previous albums is stringed instruments. You'll hear them on Heaven's Gonna Wait, We Are Unbreakable, and Stormy. I really like the use of strings here. It helps to give the album a more orchestral sound, it helps to emphasize the overall uplifting sound of the album. Besides the ballads, it's also pretty uplifting with the more energetic songs on here if it wasn't obvious that it would be. In particular, Bullet for Your Dreams and Hot Mess are both pretty upbeat fun songs. I especially like the electric guitar on the latter song. It really reminds me of the instrumental version of the theme song of Larry Boy the Cartoon Adventures, played during the show's credits. It's not even just in the music. In terms of lyrical content, this album definitely seems to be going for an uplifting sound. In addition to the aforementioned Invincible and One Life, many of these songs' lyrics are related to persevering or overcoming struggles in one way or another. Take Young, a song about being tired of the same routine and living like an adult, and longing for being young and partying, or We Are Unbreakable, which is a song about being beaten and knocked down, but being given hope by your partner and making it through with them, or Bullet for Your Dreams, which by the way is my favorite song on the album, which is about not having your voice silenced and standing up even when other people try to shut you up, or Carry On, one of the deluxe edition tracks, which is about how your partner will be your strength to carry on, and how their heart, which you hold like a part of you, keeps you from falling down. The lyrics of a few of these songs also enforce the album's overall imagery of stormy weather, or being at sea. I already mentioned the big black cloud and stormy sky on the first verse of Invincible, but you'll also have lyrics like Shipwrecked by a Sea So Stormy, or I Was Drifting on the Ocean Tide on the second verse of We Are Unbreakable, or pretty much the entirety of the song Stormy. Oh, by the way, Stormy was actually co-written by Babyface. Yes, the R&B singer-songwriter. That nautical imagery also enforces that uplifting feeling of persevering through and making it through the storm, even when the waters get rough. That uplifting sound was definitely what Hedley were going for with this album. As Hogarth said himself,
"There was a lot going on in our own lives, some pretty serious issues, but we found ourselves drawing strength from adversity and deciding to fight on. We're such a close band of brothers that when someone falls, you pick them back up. And what this record's about is perseverance. Storms can be absolutely wretched, but in the end, even the worst of it comes to pass."
Speaking of serious issues, shortly before they began recording Storms, Tommy Mac, the band's bassist, was, unfortunately, diagnosed with cancer. He actually recorded his tracks for the album in between his cancer treatments. The feeling of perseverance and looking up even when times get rough was definitely something that must have resonated with them since one of their members was having health problems, so it only feels fitting that their album would revolve around just that. No doubt that was a factor in Hedley wanting the album to be more uplifting and perseverant. And thankfully, Tommy Mac did survive and was soon declared cancer-free. I really do think Hedley succeeded with that uplifting sound. The only song that doesn't really go for that uplifting sound, either musically or lyrically, is Beautiful, which, like I said, is an acoustic ballad that feels like a leftover track from The Show Must Go. It was first performed a lot closer to that album's release date than Storms is. Despite the fact that this was a departure from their pop-punk sound, that doesn't automatically make the album bad. While I know some Hedley fans didn't like Storms and thought that this was a sign that they had now sold out, I actually really enjoyed this album. In fact, Storms is actually my personal favorite Hedley album. Yes, I like it more than any of their previous 3 albums. This is definitely the album of theirs that I enjoyed the most from start to finish. The lyrics are strong, the orchestral sound really gives it a sense of swell and grandeur, and most of these songs had fantastic melodies, both for the upbeat songs and the ballads. I dare say this is Hedley's most experimental and musically diverse album they've ever made. Somehow, the more electronic and poppy elements don't clash with the more orchestral sounds of the strings, and both manage to find their place on this album. Besides the non-punk, slightly less rockier sound, there was also something else about Storms that marked a shift in the band's direction. Remember how I said that The Show Must Go was the first Hedley album that didn't have all 4 members of songwriters for every song, and that it was the album of theirs in which the 3 instrument players had the least creative involvement with? Well, Storms has even less creative involvement from the 3 instrument players in The Show Must Go. Hogarth is credited as a songwriter for every track on the album. Meanwhile, the only instrument player with any songwriting credits here is Dave Rosen, who co-wrote Beautiful and I Won't Let You Go Darling. Those also happen to be the 2 songs on the album that Hogarth produced along with Brian Howes. Although Hogarth had been the band's lead singer since the beginning, even during the band's original incarnation in 2003, at this point, he was completely taking over the band's creative direction and really stepping up to the front as the face of Hedley, with his bandmates fading into the background. I don't know about you, but this concept of a band adopting a much poppier sound and the lead singer taking up the entire spotlight and being the only one in the band to now have any creative direction really does remind me of a certain American band whom a lot of music critics argue isn't even really a band anymore, but a glorified solo project for the lead singer. That being said, it seemed like the poppier sound was paying off for Hedley, as Storms was a commercial success. It peaked at number 2 on the Canadian Albums chart, only just blocked from being number 1 by Michael Bublé's Christmas, and was certified platinum by Music Canada. It was also nominated for Pop Album of the Year once again at the 2012 Juno Awards, and it won, becoming Hedley's second and, spoiler alert, last Juno win. A year later, Storms would be nominated again for simply Album of the Year at the 2013 Juno Awards. Also, even though they weren't released as singles, the songs Heaven's Gonna Wait and I Will Let You Go Darling both charted on the Canadian Hot 100 the week after Storms was released, at number 65 and 76 respectively. The former song, as well as Nickelback's song Try Not to Love You, would earn Brian Howes a win for Producer of the Year at the 2012 Juno Awards. To promote the new album, the band embarked, no pun intended, on the Shipwreck Tour in early 2012. The tour lasted from February 10th to March 24th, taking place in 31 cities across Canada. By the way, there was actually a tragic incident that happened during the February 14th show in Dawson Creek, BC. A 28-year-old man was unfortunately assaulted at the show and ended up passing away. Anyway, following the tour, Hedley would end up performing One Life at the 2012 Juno Awards Gala on April 1st. A second smaller leg of the Shipwreck Tour began on May 24th and lasted until July 18th, taking place in just 11 locations, 10 in Canada and 1 in the UK. 2 days before the second leg of the tour began, Storms was reissued in Canada. The album would also be released in the United States around the same time. I wasn't able to find an exact date for its American release though. Both the Canadian reissue and the American standard issue are nearly identical to the Canadian standard issue, though with one difference. The album had one new song inserted at track 2, and this new song would end up being the 3rd and final single from Storms, Kiss You Inside Out.
Turn off the lights, take off your clothes, turn on the stereo.
Kiss You Inside Out was sent to Canadian radio on May 17th and was made available on iTunes on May 22nd for Canadians and June 12th for Americans. This is the other Hedley song besides Cha-Ching that wasn't written by any of the members of Hedley. One of the song's writers was Lauren Christie, a member of the songwriting/production trio The Matrix, who actually wrote and produced for quite a few artists in the 2000s, including Korn, Avril Lavigne, Britney Spears, Shakira, Hilary Duff, Liz Phair, and more. Christie herself has also written songs for a few other pop artists, most notably Bebe Rexha. But anyway, getting back to Kiss You Inside Out, this song continues Hedley's poppier direction by giving us Hedley's poppiest song yet. Having a member of The Matrix write the song was definitely no accident. What we got was an upbeat acoustic-backed pop-rock song with arguably Hedley's most blatant radio-friendly sound to date, with lyrics about making love to and kissing your partner inside out. The catchy melody is upbeat enough to dance to, but at the same time, mid-tempo enough for two people to make love to. It's a very intimate song, but definitely not explicit, even if the song is about two people having sex. I also like how the lines, "I'ma be the calm in the storm you're looking for, I'll be the shipwreck to take you down," on the first verse fit with the nautical and stormy imagery the album Storms was going for. I'll admit the line, "Give up the fight, I'm in control, why don't you let it go," on the chorus is a bit iffy, especially in hindsight given what we now know about Hogarth's sex life. More on that much later. In general though, these lyrics are very sweet, and help make the song feel more intimate. And well, it seemed only natural that Hedley's poppiest song yet would also be one of their biggest hits ever, peaking number 2 on the Canadian Hot 100, only just blocked from hitting number 1 by Katy Perry's Wide Awake. Don't worry though, it did peak at number 1 on the Much Music Countdown. Regardless, Kiss You Inside Out became Hedley's second highest charting song in the main Canadian singles chart at the time, and their highest charting song on the Canadian Hot 100. It was also number 19 on the 2012 Canadian Hot 100 Year-End list, and number 83 on the 2013 list. The song was also nominated for Single of the Year at the 2013 Juno Awards, and its music video was nominated for 2 awards at the 2013 MMVAs, Pop Video of the Year, which it lost to Desperate Measures by Marianas Trench, and Fave Video, which it lost to Stutter by Marianas Trench. Hedley themselves were nominated for Fave Artist or Group at the 2012 MMVAs, but lost to Justin Bieber. Speaking of the 2012 MMVAs, Hedley would end up performing Kiss You Inside Out at said award show. That pretty much wraps it up for the Storms era of Hedley, but before I move on, there's 3 more miscellaneous Hedley songs from 2012 that I feel are worth mentioning. First up, we have 2 Franglish, a mix of French and English, versions of Kiss You Inside Out. One featuring Quebec-born singer André-Anne Leclerc, released on June 26, 2012 according to Wikipedia, and one featuring French singer Sheriff Aluna, released on December 12, 2012, exclusively in France. Both of these versions of the song are basically just the English version, but half the lyrics, roughly every second line, rewritten in French and sung by the French language singer. I don't speak French, but I can tell that Leclerc and Luna are not singing the same lyrics in their respective versions of the song. This means half the song was rewritten in French twice, once for Canadians and once for people in France. Leclerc's version of the song would later be included on the deluxe edition of her 2015 album Black and White Heart, credited under her stage name Andy. Honestly, Hedley making a version of one of their songs partially in French wasn't surprising in the least. I mean, they are a Canadian band, and French is one of the 2 official languages of Canada and the sole official language in the province of Quebec. There definitely would be a market for them to sell to French language listeners. This actually wasn't the first time an English language Canadian band put out a French version of one of their songs. Just 1 year earlier in 2011, Simple Plan put out a Franglish version of their song Jet Lag, featuring French-Canadian singer Marie May. It helps that Pierre Bouvier was born in Montreal and French was his first language. It definitely made sense for Hedley to do something similar, even if it was just roughly every second line of the song rewritten and sung by the French language singer, rather than having the entire song rewritten in French. And spoiler alert, this actually wouldn't be the last Hedley song with some of the lyrics in French. Hedley's third miscellaneous 2012 song was True Colors, which, just like Waving Flag, is another charity collaboration song Jacob Hogarth participated in. Performed by a group of 7 Canadian artists who went by Artists Against, the song was a cover of the 1986 Cyndi Lauper song of the same name, released on November 13, 2012 during Bullying Awareness Week. Intended to raise awareness about bullying and cyberbullying, the cover was inspired by the then recent increase of teen bullying and cyberbullying, most infamously with the case of Amanda Todd. All proceeds of the song went to Kids Health Phone, a Canadian charitable organization that offers counseling to kids requiring mental health services. I wasn't able to find out how much money the cover actually raised, but it did reach number 10 on the Canadian Hot 100 after it was released, as well as number 28 on the Much Music Countdown. I've already spoken about my thoughts on this song in the My Favorite Canadian Songs video as well, so go check that out if you want to know what I think about it. Anyway, it seemed that Hedley's step into pop was paying off for them. The band was still largely successful, and they had just scored their second highest charting single ever. While the step away from their pop-punk sound did alienate some of their fans, that didn't stop them from still being a pretty big name in mainstream music in Canada. The only question would be, what exactly would Hedley do with their music next?
I wanna know you inside out. I'll spend my life trying to figure out. Just close your eyes and shut your mouth and let me kiss you inside out. I put my headphones on and go.
By 2013, pop-punk was definitely out of the mainstream. I think the only pop-punk / pop-rock band that was still getting some chart success at that point was Paramore. Keep in mind that 5 Seconds of Summer hadn't broken out yet. I don't think anyone really expected that Hedley would go back to the pop-punk / pop-rock sound that defined them in the mid-2000s, and in fact, they didn't. Toward the end of summer 2013, Hedley's lead single for their upcoming 5th studio album was released. You want Hedley to not go full on pop? F that, they can do anything.
Everybody said, boy, don't go any higher. I can do anything.
Anything was sent to radio on August 19, 2013, and to iTunes on August 27th. It's an anthemic song about how you can be anything you set your heart to, despite people telling you that you can't or shouldn't. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a fan of this song. I remember when I was in high school and heard this song and I didn't like it then. It was mostly for the lyrics. I get what it's trying to say. Follow your dreams, be whatever you set your mind to, and don't be discouraged by people saying you can't. That's a fine message, but the first few lines of the song are, everybody says you better stay in school, get a real job boy, don't be a fool, burn that guitar, you can never be a star, I can so. It almost sounds like it's telling kids to drop out of school and not pursue a normal career. I really hate to go all moral guardian, but that is not a good moral at all. Given how young most of Hedley's listeners are, it feels irresponsible to put something like that in one of their songs. Now, I don't have any evidence that a bunch of Canadian kids dropped out of school soon after this song came out, but this still doesn't sit right with me. Unlike One Life, which was telling its listeners to enjoy life and live it to its fullest, Anything is telling its listeners to ignore your conscience and advising those around you and do something that probably won't pay off. And unlike Don't Talk to Strangers, it's not executed in a naughty but fun sort of way. It's more defiant than playful. Sure, following the rockstar life worked out for Hedley, but it probably won't for the vast majority of people. It sure didn't for the 4 members from the original incarnation of Hedley. Anything sort of feels like a sequel to One Life, except its message feels way more misguided. Beyond the lyrics, the melody doesn't stick quite as well, and it's definitely not as catchy as some of Hedley's best. The chorus in particular doesn't sound quite right to me. Everybody says, boy, don't go any higher. F that, I can do anything. Never push the limit and don't play with fire. F that, I can do anything. That's the part of the song you're supposed to sing along to the most, and it just comes off as awkward. It's also a little weird that it sounds like a kid saying F that. I guess the idea was that it was supposed to sound like a kid telling off his parents when they're telling him not to blow off his studies to become a rock star, but that only enforces the misguided moral I mentioned earlier. By the way, in the radio version, they say forget that instead of F that. It's definitely not Hedley's first song to have swearing in it, but having the F word on the chorus just makes it feel like it's trying to be intentionally edgy. Even the song's music video, which, by the way, is age restricted on YouTube, feels like it's trying to be edgy by showing twerking, nudity, and sexually explicit scenes, as if the Try This at Home DVD didn't give us enough of that. And to top things off, Anything isn't even the slightest bit rock. I wouldn't even call the song pop rock, it's just full on pop, even more so than Kiss You Inside Out. The bridge with the horns and Jacob Hogarth doing a short faux rap reminds me of Can't Hold Us by Macklemore and Ryan Lewis, which was a hit not long before Anything came out. If there's any song from Hedley that feels the most like a pop sellout, it's definitely this one. All in all, I personally think Anything is a mediocre song, but it seemed the rest of Canada loved it. It peaked at number 5 on the Canadian Hot 100 in the winter between 2013 and 2014. It was also number 68 on the 2013 Billboard Year-End Canadian Hot 100 list, and number 42 on the 2014 list, number 1 on the Much Music Countdown, and it went 4 times platinum. It was also Hedley's only song to chart on another country's primary songs chart, peaking at number 18 on the New Zealand Top 40 Singles chart. I'm pretty disappointed it was this song that did it. The song's music video was also nominated for Video of the Year at the 2014 Juno Awards, as well as 4 awards at the 2014 MMVAs, Video of the Year, Director of the Year, Pop Video of the Year, and Urfe Video, all of which have won barring Director of the Year. Another spoiler alert, these would end up being Hedley's last MMVA award wins. In any case, Hedley's 5th studio album was Wildlife. It was released on November 11, 2013 in Hedley's home country of Canada. The standard edition of the album contains 11 tracks, although the deluxe edition contains 15 tracks, or 16 for iTunes/Apple Music listeners. It was co-produced by Jacob Hogarth, Brian Howes, and a handful of other producers, all of whom, along with a handful of other songwriters, wrote the album's songs. Remember how I said that Storms was Hedley's equivalent to Maroon 5's Overexposed? Well, Wildlife is Hedley's equivalent to Maroon 5's V, or Taylor Swift's 1989. It was the artist's 5th studio album, and while their 4th album seemed to show that the artist in question was moving into a pop lane, it was their 5th album that cemented it. This is where the artist in question completely shedded their original genre and officially embraced being full-on pop. Anyone who was hopeful they go back to their funk rock, country, or in Hedley's case, pop punk/pop rock sound now had to face the music. They weren't. I gotta say, this continuation of pop wasn't a surprise in the slightest. Most of the songs on Wildlife are upbeat pop songs, with a few exceptions I'll get to later. I can definitely see how many older fans of Hedley would be put off by the change of sound. It certainly doesn't help that Anything, which is definitely the worst song on the album, was chosen as the lead single and is track number 1. Not exactly a good first impression. Thankfully, the rest of the album is definitely better. I'll talk about this a little more when I get to the rest of the album's singles, but I think most of the album's non-singles are pretty decent too. I will say though, this is undoubtedly the poppiest Hedley album yet. Even though they had been progressively getting popular starting around The Show Must Go, this album really feels like they leapfrogged part of the progression and became more than twice as poppy as their last album. The guitars are muted, the original pop-punk / pop-rock sound has been pretty much completely stripped away, and there's even more electronic sounds and techniques on here. Sure, Storms had some notable electronic sounds on it, but Wildlife has more than twice the amount Storms did. These include the processed vocals, an 80s sounding synthesizer on headphones, the chiptune sound on the intro and verses of I'll Be With You, or the synthesized sound on All The Way, which reminds me of something from an EDM track. Heck, some of these songs, like Headphones, sort of sound like they have EDM beat drops on their choruses. Like with anything, I struggle to even call most of these songs pop rock. I could at least consider most of the songs on Storms to be pop rock, and I could still say that a couple were somewhat pop punk, even if they weren't as heavy as their first two albums. I can't say the same here. The one big exception to this is Mexico, which is definitely the outlier on the album. Unlike the rest of the album, Mexico definitely tries to sound much more rock-like with the minor chords, the build-up on the chorus, and the heavy guitars in the post-chorus. It sort of gives me the sense of listening to a southern blues rock song, or something that would belong in a western movie, which I definitely think is what they were going for with the song. It sort of reminds me of I'd Hear Heaven, a song from Headley's original incarnation's demo and live CDs, which also had a bit of a twangy southern rock sound. Anyway, Mexico is easily the most badass song on the album, and I also gotta give props to Jacob Hogarth for holding out the final syllable on the final chorus. It really sticks out like a sore thumb compared to the rest of the album, but unlike Gunnan from their self-titled album, I think it's actually a good thing here. I'm glad it's on the album, and it's easily Headley's heaviest song since Don't Talk to Strangers. Maybe if it was a little less overproduced, it might have actually fit in as a song on their 2005 self-titled album. For all that, it's definitely a standout track on the album, and one of my favorites on here. Barring that one big exception though, it really does feel like they were trying to hold off on making these songs sound too heavy so as not to alienate pop listeners, which I do think came at the detriment of some of these songs. One such example is All The Way, which is a fine power ballad sounding song about asking if a partner would change their heart if you poured your heart out and truly showed how sorry you are. However, I do feel like they sprinkled in some synthesized sounds to make it sound more poppy, which I think was unnecessary. I have no doubt that if this song had been in one of their previous 4 albums, they would have definitely made the song hit a little harder to really drive home the emotion. It is nice to hear Hogarth showing off his falsetto on that song though. Nothing will be perfect though in terms of the best use of Hogarth's falsetto. The other 2 ballads on this album, however, are much better. One of the singles, which I'll talk about later, and the title track. You know, it's kind of funny that this album is super upbeat and poppy, yet it's named after the slowest song on the album. Both of these ballads really stand out as they legitimately feel like they have an actual message to them and are actually being meaningful. And no, the messages aren't misguided like they were on Anything, they're actually genuinely good messages. In Wildlife, the title track's case, it's a song about how this world is messed up because of war and people destroying the planet, but you and I can find a better place to be despite all the chaos and crappiness happening in the world right now. And yeah, that's definitely a really good message. This world is pretty messed up, and there's so many atrocities that happen on the news and all over the world, but we can still find a place to be safe amidst everything falling apart around us. In today's political climate, that's definitely a message that we need now more than ever before. The piano-driven melody gives it a somber tone, but with a small feeling of hope in it, which is definitely a sound I like. Additionally, that synthesized melody on the post-chorus gives us sort of an outer spacey sort of feel, which really emphasizes how tiny your planet is compared to the universe, and how despite how awful and messed up our world is, nothing really matters. It gives the song a nihilistic but also content and atmospheric sound. Honestly, on its own merits, Wildlife isn't a bad album. Besides maybe Anything, I didn't dislike any of the songs on here. Headphones, as electronic and overly synthesized as it is a pretty good song about drowning out the world by putting on your headphones and listening to music, and one that definitely grew on me the more I listened to it. Dreaming's for Sleeping is a really fun, upbeat song, and next to the album's second single, which I'll talk about in just a bit, is the catchiest song on here. God Love, which is probably the only song on here besides Mexico that could really be considered pop rock by some stretch of the imagination, is another pretty catchy, upbeat song. I especially like the female voice harmonizing with Jacob Hogarth in the pre-chorus. By the way, the 4 deluxe edition tracks, on average, aren't quite as electronic or synthesized sounding as the 11 standard edition tracks. Almost Over is definitely the most synthesized song of the deluxe edition tracks with those synthesized backing vocals. I'm actually kind of glad that song didn't make the standard edition, as it reminds me a little too much of Headphones. Beautiful Girl, my personal favorite of the deluxe edition tracks, is a pretty pleasant love song. Its melody and sound sort of remind me of the worship songs I used to hear in church. Parade Rain is a pretty decent song too. Between its general sound and having lyrics like "Don't bring around the clouds to rain on my parade" and If It Keeps On Raining, We'll March Until the Sun Comes Out, it really feels like a leftover track from Storms. I can definitely see why that song misses Standard Edition, since it doesn't really fit in. Top of the World is decent as well, though its melody isn't quite as catchy or memorable as the Standard Edition tracks. I do like its echoey, atmospheric sound though. It fits with the earthy lyrics about being taken to the bottom of the ocean, the earth shaking, and mountains crumbling. I'll also say these 4 songs are noticeably slower than the average song on the Standard Edition. I can see why all these songs were left off, as they were clearly trying to make Wildlife a more upbeat album. So yeah, despite being what many would call a sellout album, Wildlife really isn't bad at all. If this album had been recorded by some other artist besides Hedley and releases their first album, few people would probably have any real issue with it. I wouldn't call this album great, it's definitely not Hedley's best album, but it's not bad by any stretch either. Though I imagine music critics who dislike Maroon 5 after going full on pop would feel similarly about Hedley's music from this point on. And that's not the only parallel Hedley was having to Maroon 5 around this time. Remember how I said that Storms only had 2 songs co-written by one of the band's instrument players? Well, Wildlife is the first Hedley album in which none of the instrument players had any hand in writing any of the songs. This album definitely took Storms' as title as a Hedley album with the least creative involvement from the 3 instrument players, as it has 0 creative involvement from them. Not only that, but whereas Hogarth co-produced 2 songs on Storms, he co-produced every song on Wildlife barring 1. Whereas Rosin, Mac, and Crippen's creative involvement with Hedley's albums had slowly been shrinking and had now completely dissipated, around the same time, Hogarth's creative involvement was increasing. It really seemed at this point like Hogarth was becoming the sole prominent figure of Hedley, while his bandmates were fading into the background. Not too dissimilar to how people were starting to perceive Adam Levine and Maroon 5 around this time, and claiming they're not even a real band anymore. To quote Hogarth,
I'm almost always referring to the band like a mechanism, but the reality is, I'm the writer. We magically just shifted it into a piece where I took more of the lead, as opposed to being more of a democratic process. I spearheaded it because my vision seemed the most in line with where to go, but also because of the trust of the guys. As I started to take more of a leadership creatively, I also started to see the success of the band still grow, and the music that I was writing on my own have impact and make the audience react well. It wasn't like they were, oh god, we're fucked.
Not only did Hogarth's bandmates have 0 creative involvement in the album, but according to Chris Crippen, Rosin, Mac, and himself seldom played their instruments on this album at all. I mean, the 3 of them seemed to be okay with it, at least at the time, but it is a very noticeable shift in the band's direction, both behind the scenes wise and in terms of actual output. Hogarth himself would end up discussing each song in Wildlife Commentary, an album containing all 11 of the album's Standard Edition tracks, plus a new track for each of the 11 tracks, containing Hogarth discussing the songwriting and behind-the-scenes process for each track, and sometimes playing a small portion of each song on the piano, with the actual song's instrumental in the background.
This has to be my most favorite song that I've written, that I've produced. It has so much to do with the way not just the band has been exploring different avenues and realms of music, but the way that we've been growing as a group. So Headphones was a track that I started on my iPad, and the sound at the beginning of it is an electric guitar playing the hook line, but that was the first thing I came up with for this song on my iPad, on this shitty little music program.
It's an interesting listen. Check it out if you're curious to know what Hogarth's process was for making each song. As for the original album, Wildlife was yet another successful album for Hedley, peaking number 4 on the Canadian Albums Chart and being certified platinum by Music Canada. It would also be nominated for Pop Album of the Year at the 2014 Juno Awards and later Album of the Year at the 2015 Junos. Also, even though it wasn't released as a single, Beautiful Girl from the deluxe edition charted at number 72 on the Canadian Hot 100 the week after Wildlife was released. Another exciting thing that Hedley did around the time Wildlife came out was being the performers of the Canadian Football League Grey Cup halftime show in Regina, Saskatchewan on November 24, 2013, performing a medley of the songs Hands Up, Anything, Invincible, and Cha-Ching. This is probably the closest Hedley have ever gotten to being on the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, Hedley was still virtually unknown outside of Canada. It is worth mentioning that Wildlife was the album in which Hedley was trying their hardest to break into the American market. On December 3rd, 2013, the EP Anything was released, exclusively in the United States for digital. The EP contains 5 tracks, all of which appear on Wildlife, including Anything. Anything was also released as Hedley's 5th single in the United States under Capitol Records. Unfortunately, the song didn't really have much impact in the States, thank goodness. The album Wildlife would later be released in the United States on May 19th or 20th, 2014, according to Wikipedia. Hedley would also perform 2 shows in the USA after the new year came. One in New York City on January 14th and one in LA on January 16th. Only a few days after that LA show, the second single from Wildlife was released. Fans who were already crazy for Hedley could now even more appropriately say to them that they were crazy for you. Crazy for You was released to radio on January 20th, 2014, although it was originally available on October 23rd, 2013 for those who would pre-order Wildlife on iTunes. Anyway, remember how I said that Invincible was sort of Hedley's equivalent to Maroon 5's Payphone? Well, Crazy for You is their equivalent to Maroon 5's Sugar. It was the band's poppiest single yet, and the song that cemented that they were definitely staying in a pop lane. Shifting away from the sound that originally defined them in the mid-2000s wasn't just an experiment for one album, it was here to stay, and this was the song that officially proved it. That being said though, I will say that if there was any song that justified Hedley going full on pop, it was definitely Crazy for You. Not only is it a significantly better song than their previous single, but it's probably the catchiest song they've ever made. It's an upbeat disco pop song with a funky guitar line and an infectiously catchy melody. Seriously, once you hear the song's melody, you will never be able to unhear it. Despite the significant prevalence of processed sounds like electronic piano, Daft Punk-esque vocals, and fake hand claps on the bridge, it's so incredibly sticky and fun that it makes me completely forget that the artist who made this song used to be a pop-punk/pop rock band in the mid to late 2000s. Like Taylor Swift's Style, this was the song that showed audiences that even though the artist in question had abandoned the genre they were originally known for, they could still make a fantastic pop song. And perhaps there was still reason to keep listening to their music, despite now apparently having sold out. If there is a weakness that Crazy for You has, besides the fake hand claps which make the fact that they have a drummer who can handle the percussive beats feel redundant, I will say I'm not a huge fan of Jacob Hogarth's falsetto on the chorus. It doesn't really fit here like it did on Perfect, but that's a minor nitpick, and the rest of the song absolutely makes up for it. I'm definitely crazy for this song, and so is Canada, as it managed to peak at number 7 on the Canadian Hot 100, number 22 on the 2014 Billboard Year-End Canadian Hot 100 list, number 1 on the Much Music Countdown, gets certified 2 times platinum by Music Canada, and gets music video nominated for Post-Production of the Year of the 2014 MMVAs. Along with Anything, the song earned Brian Howes a nomination for Producer of the Year at the 2014 Junos. The following year, the song was nominated for Single of the Year at the 2015 Junos, and Song of the Year at the 2015 Canadian Radio Music Awards. To promote their newest album, Hedley would go on the Wild Live Tour. The tour lasted from February 14th to April 17th, taking place in 36 cities across Canada. About a month later, they would get to play 3 shows in Europe, one in Berlin on May 21st, one in Paris on May 23rd, and one in London, England on May 28th. And those wouldn't be the only foreign places Hedley would travel to in 2014. More on that in a bit. One more notable show Hedley played in 2014 was at that year's MMVAs, held on June 15th, playing Crazy for You, their newest single. Just 2 days later, according to Wikipedia, Hedley got a newest single. The third single from Wildlife was Heaven in Our Headlights.
Even God don't know where we're going, and I sure as hell don't care.
Now here's a song that was definitely written to be a driving anthem. Heaven in Our Headlights is a song about 2 lovers being together on the road driving. They don't know where they're going, even God doesn't know, but they sure as hell don't care, because heaven's in their car's headlights, and they're making some good memories together as they speed along the open road. I mean, as far as driving songs go, it's no Start Me Up or Take It Easy, and I have no doubt Hedley could have made an even better driving song for one of their first 2 albums when they were still a rock band, but Heaven in Our Headlights is still a decently fun song, and one that I could imagine someone blasting in an open-top car down a desert road at dusk or dawn. By the way, driving in an open-top car down a desert road is exactly what happens in the song's music video. I will say the song definitely wouldn't have been my choice for the third single. I would have gone with Headphones or Dreamings for Sleeping instead, but Heaven in Our Headlights certainly isn't a bad song. The piano chords at the start of the song remind me quite a bit of the beginning of For the Nights I Can't Remember, though by the time the first chorus comes, it becomes clear that this is its own song. The whistling melody on the post-chorus also helps to make it feel like a driving song. I do hope that the title lyric, If You and I Could Say This High with Heaven in Our Headlights, is referring to a love high, not a drug high. Don't drive high! If it is a drug high, that definitely makes Hogarth's voice becoming slurred on the bridge uncomfortable. But anyway, this song never took off as a driving or road trip anthem like Hedley was probably hoping, but it did pick at number 14 on the Canadian Hot 100, number 52 on the Canadian Year-End Hot 100 list, and number 2 on the Much Music Countdown, only being blocked from hitting number 1 by Sia's Chandelier, making it Hedley's first song on the Much Music Countdown to not hit number 1 since Street Fight back in 2007. Its music video was nominated for both Best Pop Video and Fan Fave Video of the 2015 MMVAs. The song itself, as well as Crazy For You, both won Pop/Rock Music Awards at the 2015 SOCAN Awards. In September 2014, Headley traveled to Ecuador for yet another school building trip with Free the Children. 2 months before the trip, Headley asked their fans to help them raise $10,000 to build the school, which their fans did indeed help them raise. Headley even documented their time in Ecuador in a 6-part webisode series.
Building a school here in Ecuador is important because just like a lot of countries around the world, a lot of the rural areas in these countries don't have access to education, and education, as we know, is a human right that we all are entitled to. So, to be able to go into a rural area where it's not as readily available as it might be in the capital city, for example, is an important part of the process of making sure that every child on this globe has access to education.
By the way, I find it rather hypocritical that Jacob Hogarth would say that education is a human right and help build a school for kids in a rural Ecuadorian village, when the song Anything felt like it was telling kids to drop out of school to become a rock star. But hey, he helped kids in Ecuador get an education by building a school for them, so I guess it was still net positive. In addition to building a school, Headley also got to play soccer with kids, visit a shaman, visit a fruit farmer's farm, collect drinking water, pan for gold, take a walk through the Amazon jungle, and more. It's a nice little webisode series. I'll leave links to all 6 episodes in the description if you want to watch it for yourself. On November 18th, 2014, Headley released one last single from Wildlife, and what in my opinion was the best song on the entire album, Pocket Full of Dreams.
I found a shooting star in the pocket of my jeans.
Pocket Full of Dreams is one of 2 straightforward ballads from Wildlife, and one of the few Headley songs that has a legit great and meaningful message to it. Lyrically, it's one of the simplest songs Headley have ever made. 2 verses that are 4 lines each, a chorus that's also 4 lines long, and a bridge that consists of ooh 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 sounds followed by 3 lines. However, these lyrics, while simple, are also incredibly powerful. The chorus of the song goes as follows. I found a shooting star in the pocket of my jeans. I won the lottery and built a time machine. I got everything and everything is mine to lose, but I don't want anything but you. It's a song about having everything you could ever want, but ultimately not wanting any of that. What ultimately matters, more than money or material possessions, is your partner. That's a great message, and definitely much better than the message on Anything. What really helps to elevate the song even more is the sound and instrumentation. Starting off with that organ at the beginning of the song, it slowly begins to add more instruments as the song goes on. A gentle electric guitar, followed by clapping, harmonization behind Hogarth's voice, and piano. The song slowly gets louder as it goes on, but it never gets too loud. The song actually reaches its crescendo by the second chorus. It never gets any louder than that for the rest of the song. This is one Headley song that I actually think benefited from their poppier sound. The song is going for more of a soft rock ballad, like it's the kind of song where the audience can raise their lighters up while it's being performed live. The muted electric guitar and restraint from sounding super rocky actually works in its favor. It's a very different sort of ballad than For the Nights I Can't Remember or Perfect. It's trying to be emotional, but not in a straightforward love ballad sort of way, and it really works. If pre-pop Headley had made this song, it probably would have sounded too rocky, which would have gone against its tone. Something else that really makes the song hit hard is after the bridge, when the lyrics of the chorus change to, I never found a shooting star and there's holes in my jeans. I didn't win the lottery or build a time machine. I never had much at all, but I still got everything to lose, cause I don't want anything but you. Flipping the song around at the very end and revealing that actually, you don't have anything, but that's okay, because wealth and material possessions aren't what's really important. What's really important is your partner. Like many other songs where the chorus changes at the end, it gives a song an emotional payoff and completes the story. In Pocket Full of Dreams' case, it's a bittersweet one, as it reveals that the protagonist actually didn't have anything, but is still happy because none of that mattered to them anyway. For all of that, Pocket Full of Dreams is easily my favorite song on Wildlife and one of Headley's top 10 best songs ever. Unfortunately, Pocket Full of Dreams would end up being the lowest charting single from Wildlife, only peaking number 33 on the Canadian Hot 100. Also, no music video was made for this song, although it did get a lyric video. On March 15th, 2015, that year's Juno Awards were broadcast. I already talked about Headley's nominations at said award show, but in addition to those nominations, Headley also performed the song Anything at the award show, and Jacob Hogarth hosted the awards.
Hey, I'm Jacob, and I'll be hosting the Juno Awards Sunday, March 15th. Don't miss.
Hogarth was actually against hosting when he was first asked, but he eventually agreed to do it. Shame Headley didn't win any awards at that show. It would have been really cool to see Hogarth present an award to himself and his bandmates. On the topic of 2015 award shows, Headley were nominated for Chart Topper Award and Fans' Choice at the 2015 CRMAs, the former of which they won. And that pretty much wraps it up for Wildlife. Despite now having gone completely pop, Headley was still a pretty big band in Canada. They were still scoring hits, and they were still a well-known name in the Great White North. Even though they left some fans behind with their new sound, the fans who stayed with them were certainly enjoying the new music they were putting out. Would they continue to enjoy the new music? Well, it would depend on what they put out next. Let's just take a look and see.
'Cause I don't want anything but you.
According to many of Hedley's critics and former fans, Hedley had now officially sold out. Their new music was just pandering to a pop audience and specifically designed to make as much money as possible in a time where pop punk and pop rock were no longer popular. They were clearly only going this direction to keep with the times and follow along with current trends. Hedley's poppier sound was so different from their original pop punk / pop rock sound, it might as well have been in another language. I guess you could say for some, their new music had gotten lost in translation. Lost in Translation was released on September 8th, 2015, as the lead single from their upcoming 6th studio album. It's a pickup song about flirting with foreign girls, and honestly, this is the second lead single from a Hedley album in a row that I don't really like. I'm personally not one to accuse artists of selling out or claim that they only did X thing because it was trendy, even if those criticisms have varying degrees of legitimacy to them. That being said, if there is any song from Hedley that does legitimately feel like it was just trying to be trendy, it's definitely Lost in Translation. I remember cringing the first time I heard this song, and for one simple reason: Jacob Hoggard rapping. I'm sorry, but he should not rap. I mean, he's done faux rapping before on songs like Don't Talk to Strangers and Anything, but on Lost in Translation, it sounds more akin to full-on rapping. Speaking of the former song, Hoggard's screamy voice on the second half of the verses of Lost in Translation reminds me of his screamy voice on the second half of the bridge of Don't Talk to Strangers. Yeah, that screamy voice is definitely the worst part of both songs. It's not even just that the lyrics are rapped. Some of the lyrics are cringeworthy too. Lyrics like, International baby it's a frenzy, looking trendy, Gucci Fendi, or No comprendi, be my girlfriendy, or got a booty like a South American, maybe from Paris, clap clap clap, it don't need interpretation, also give me the impression that Hedley wanted to make a rap song to seem hip in 2015. Even the song's production with the record scratches, electronic synths, and horns, similar to the ones on Anything, make the song sound more hip-hop. The chorus of the song is definitely better than the verses. It certainly is catchy and fun to sing to. I just wish it was in a better song because the rest of the song is just embarrassing. I honestly feel like the song would have worked better if it was by a rapper as the lead artist, with Jacob Hoggard being the featured artist singing just the chorus and maybe the bridge. I have no clue why Hedley thought the song was a good idea, and it seemed the public agreed with me because it was a major flop. It failed to chart on the Canadian Hot 100 at all, making it Hedley's first lead single to miss the top 10 since She's So Sorry from 2007, and their first single to not chart on the Canadian Hot 100 since the chart was even established in 2007. It did reach number 24 on the Much Music Countdown though. By the way, on a side note, the song's official lyric video starts out in this cryptic font that slowly turns into the English alphabet over the course of the video. I guess it is kind of clever as it fits with the song's title, but it kind of defeats the purpose of a lyric video, being that it's supposed to display the lyrics of the song. It's hard to do that when a chunk of it is in Hedley wingdings. The English lyrics and parts of the song that are in French are in the description though. Speaking of which, there's also a link in the description to Hedley's cryptic font. Unfortunately, that link doesn't go anywhere now, and it's not saved on the web archive. Although according to the web archive, it looks like the link led to a downloadable zip file, which I assume would have contained a translation of Hedley's cryptic font. If any hardcore Hedley fan has a zip file downloaded and wants to share the contents with me, please let me know on Twitter or my Discord server. It is also a little clever for a song called Lost in Translation about flirting with foreign girls to have a few lyrics in French, but it still doesn't save the song from being mediocre. That makes 2 Hedley albums in a row with a dud first single. Due to the single's failure, Hedley quickly ceased all promotion for it a month after its release. They then released the second single from their upcoming 6th studio album and began promotion for it instead. On October 9th, 2015, fans said hello to Hello.
And say hello.
Hello is the song that should have been the lead single from their 6th album in the first place. I'm glad it was eventually released as a single, but their decision to go with Lost in Translation as the lead single is beyond baffling to me. Hello is definitely a much better song, and a much better first impression for their next album. It's a mid-tempo pop song about trying to rekindle a failing relationship and prove that it's not over yet. Deep down, the protagonist is still in love with his partner and believes that they can make it work. Let's not fight anymore, and let's not be alone. Don't be sad, don't let go, don't say goodbye, just say hello. Apparently, this song actually was inspired by a real relationship Jacob Hoggard had as a child. Even the song's music video, showcasing a love story between two grade school kids, was inspired by that same real relationship. Overall, Hello is a pretty good song. It's definitely catchy, and does really emphasize a feeling of holding on and not losing hope about a relationship that's crumbling down. Also, this song actually came out the exact same month as the Adele song of the same name, which coincidentally was also a song about a failed relationship. Although that song was very nostalgic and regretful, whereas Hedley's song was more hopeful. Suffice to say, the Adele song was a much bigger success, even in Canada. Just like on nearly every country's main singles chart, Adele's Hello peaked at number 1 on the Canadian Hot 100 chart. Hedley's Hello, meanwhile, only peaked number 20, as well as number 94 on the 2016 Billboard Year-End Canadian Hot 100 list, although it did peak at number 1 on the Much Music Countdown. On November 6, 2015, almost exactly 1 month after saying hello to Hello, the single, fans said hello to Hello, the album. The standard edition of the album contains 11 tracks, although the deluxe edition contains 14 tracks. It was once again co-produced by Jacob Hoggard, Brian Howes, as well as a few other producers, including Jason Van Poderoyen, or JVP for short, and Nolan Sipe, both of whom had previously been songwriters for songs on Storms and Wildlife. These producers, along with a handful of other songwriters, wrote the album's songs. By the way, another interesting note is that Hello is actually Hedley's first album to be released on vinyl. Given the resurgence of vinyl during the 2010s, Hedley jumping on board that trend honestly wasn't a surprise. I'm gonna be honest, Hello is my least favorite Hedley album. I wouldn't call it a bad album, but it's definitely the album of theirs that I found myself liking the least. From beginning to end, the songs on the standard edition of the album hit the lowest overall average of any Hedley album. I mean, it certainly doesn't help that Lost in Translation is the first track on it after all. The album continues with the pop sound that Wildlife had, except it feels even more watered down here. Most of the songs on Hello lean very much into the electronic and electropop sound, even more so than on Wildlife. At times, it does sort of feel like I'm listening to a cut from the Chainsmokers. Like the previous album, you'll also hear a fair amount of vocal processing here. The song Man Killer is definitely the worst offender of processed vocals. It starts out with a weird garbled voice that sounds like it's being played in reverse, that's also heard on the outro. There's also another weird garbled voice sound played in the chorus and after the final chorus that sounds sort of like it was pitch bended or pitch shifted, and I'm not sure if it was. There's also the recurring voices on Back to Basics that sound like voicemail recordings, and actually, that was intentional, given the song is about trying to catch up with some old friends you haven't seen in a while, instead people leaving voicemails trying to catch up with you. Having voices that sound like voicemail recordings in the song does fit into the song conceptually. With the exception of right before the chorus of I Will, I don't believe there's any pitch-shifted vocals on here. They could have definitely included more pitch-shifted vocals like the Chipmunk voice on here, as it would have fit perfectly with the album's sound. Either way, this is hands down the most heavily processed and watered sound they've had. That's not to say the album is terrible though. Again, it's not a bad album, it's just their least interesting. Aside from Lost in Translation and maybe Man Killer, I don't think there's any outright bad songs on this album. The album's singles, barring Lost in Translation, are all decent, and there are a few other songs on here that are also pretty upbeat and fun to listen to, like Quit and Alive, the latter of which is my favorite song on the album. By the way, it's kind of ironic that Quit is such an upbeat, happy-sounding song, considering its lyrics about an unfaithful partner and calling it quits on the relationship. A couple songs, like Very First Time and I Will, I thought were just okay when I first heard them, but they grew on me after subsequent listens. Although I can't say the same about Back to Basics. It's a fine song, I suppose, and I do appreciate the lyrical sentiment, but it doesn't really stand out too much for me, musically or melodically. I do like the melodic drums that sort of sound like bongo drums on the second half of the song, but that's about it. I wouldn't turn the song off if it came on my radio, but at the same time, I wouldn't miss it too much if it wasn't on this album. Like I said, it's okay. Honestly, that's the best way to describe Hello. It's an okay album. It's got some good songs on it, and a couple I don't really like, and overall, it averages out to decent, 6 out of 10. That's why I consider it to be my least favorite Hedley album. While certainly not a bad album, it just feels the least interesting. I feel like Hedley is capable of delivering more than we get on this album, which is why it feels a bit underwhelming to me. A few of the melodies on here just weren't that catchy or were that memorable, and that ended up making these songs feel bland to me. I think Man Killer is probably the blandest song Hedley have ever made, at least musically. It doesn't help that song also has the worst production I've ever heard from Hedley, with those aforementioned garbled vocals. Still, I can't call the song terrible, it's just mediocre. and unfortunately, this detriments the album, as it doesn't hit the overall average I feel like it should. I can't even say this is due to the album having filler songs. This album could have actually hit a higher average if maybe a couple of the deluxe edition tracks had made the standard edition. Sympathy and Kids are both really great upbeat tracks, especially the latter, which is an absolute banger of a song. If they had swapped out a couple of the more bland or mediocre tracks for either of them, I would definitely like this album a lot more, but alas. So it's not like the album is loaded with filler, it more so feels like they really didn't prioritize which songs would make the standard edition of the album. Seriously, go listen to Kids. If that song had made the actual album, it might actually take Alive's place as my favorite song on the album. It's got a great upbeat catchy melody, an adrenaline rushing vibe, and lyrics about living on the edge by hanging out with a friend, constantly going broke, getting high, and running from the cops. Maybe not the most moral song, but a really fun one regardless, that I can't help but love. By the way, according to Chris Crippen, neither he, Rosin, nor Mac played their instruments at all on this album aside from maybe one or two tracks. In my opinion, the song where this is the most evident is the final song on the album, The Knife, which is a piano ballad about mutually ending a relationship despite the fact that you're still in love with the person you're breaking up with. It's not a bad song at all, it's actually pretty good. Even if in terms of Hedley piano ballads, it's not as memorable as For the Nights I Can't Remember, Perfect, or Wildlife. Unlike those three songs though, this song is completely stripped back. Literally the only instrument on the song is piano. No guitars, bass, or drums, and ergo, no instrument playing from Rosin, Mac, or Crippen. Plus, Hogarth was the only band member involved in the songwriting, and he co-wrote the song just like every other song on the album. Honestly, the song probably shouldn't even be on this album, as it's the Hedley song which is the most obvious that only 1/4 of its members had anything to do with it. This song really should have been reserved for a solo Jacob Hogarth album. I mean, I know at this point in the band's career, Hedley already felt like a solo Jacob Hogarth project, just like how a lot of people feel like Maroon 5 starting around the second half of the 2010s felt like a solo Adam Levine project, but at least with most of their songs, you could argue that the other band members were still playing their instruments on their songs, even if they were buried behind over-processed production. You definitely can't say the same for The Knife, and that's why I feel like the song shouldn't even be on the album, because it's not a Hedley song, it's a Jacob Hogarth song. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad song at all, it's just out of place on an album credited to Hedley. Also, they could have really made the song so much better by having it be more of a power ballad, similar to Perfect or Pocketful of Dreams, by slowly adding more instruments throughout the song, and building up to a huge crescendo on the final chorus throughout the song. Not only would that have given Rosin, Mac, and Crippen something to do on this song, and justified its place on a Hedley album, but it could have also driven home the emotion of the song harder. But it doesn't do that. You know how some songs have piano versions that are a remix of the song entirely on piano, sometimes a little bit slower than the original song? That's what the song feels like. It feels like a piano version of the original song, except the original song doesn't exist. This is the only version of it that exists. As such, it doesn't really feel like it hits as hard as it should. It's a perfect example of a song with wasted potential. Okay, I've been a little harsh on this album. Again, I want to emphasize that Hello isn't a bad album, it's just not quite as good as I feel like it could have been. I definitely feel like it could have hit a higher overall average, and unfortunately, it ended up missing that mark. You could definitely call this album a disappointment for me. And of course, disappointment will always make you a target of heavier criticism. And unfortunately, disappointment makes me unable to recommend this album as a whole. My recommendation is this: listen to only the 5 or 6 best songs from the album and leave the rest. At least for the standard edition. Again, Kids is an absolute banger Hedley song, and I'm baffled why it was relegated to the deluxe edition. It should have been on the standard edition. Go listen to that song too. But as for the album as a whole, it ended up debuting at #1 on the Canadian Albums Chart. Yeah, you think Hedley would have already had a #1 album by this point, but no, Hello was their first. It was also certified platinum by Music Canada and got nominated for Pop Album of the Year at the 2016 Juno Awards. Barring an acoustic piano version of Hello released on YouTube, the first thing Hedley would release in 2016 was the 3rd single from Hello. On March 4th, 2016, Hedley's newest single hit Canadian radio, Lose Control. Lose Control is basically what you'd expect it to be. It's a dance pop and electropop song about dancing and losing control when a song comes on. I will say that this song does feel like it's coming out somewhat late. This song was released as a single in 2016, a few years after the club boom had died down. With a few exceptions, most of the pop songs on the radio in 2016 were mostly slow or downbeat. Even the more upbeat pop songs from 2016 that can be considered dance pop still didn't really have the club boom energy that most pop songs from 2009 to 2011 had. Even actual EDM artists around the time, like the Chainsmokers or Major Lazer, were mostly making mid-tempo at best electronic tracks. As such, Lose Control really sticks out like a sore thumb compared compared to what was popular at the time. It really feels like a song that should have been released back when the club boom was at its height in 2010 or 2011. Then again, Headley still hadn't quite gone full on pop at that point. Still though, I won't deny that Lose Control is a pretty fun track, even if it's mid-tier on Hello. It definitely is a song that makes you feel like getting up and dancing to it. It actually sounds just like a song that you would hear in a Just Dance video game. No doubt if Headley was any popular outside of Canada, it would have easily made it onto a game in the series by now. Lose Control peaked at number 37 on the Canadian Hot 100, number 91 on the 2016 Billboard Year-End Canadian Hot 100 list, and number 1 on the Month Music Countdown, which, spoiler alert, would be Headley's last song to chart there. The song was also certified platinum by Music Canada, becoming the only single from Hello to receive any certification. Yeah, strangely enough, the title track, which peaked 17 spots higher, didn't even go gold. Headley would end up performing the song at the 2016 MMVAs. The song's music video was also nominated for Best Pop Video and Fan Fave Video at said award show. Speaking of which, Lose Control's music video is the Headley video with the most views, with just over 10 million views as of this recording, which is strange given that it's far from Headley's most popular song. On April 7th, Headley launched the Hello World Tour. The tour lasted until May 20th, taking place in 27 locations across Canada. Fellow Canadian artist Carly Rae Jepsen, yes, a Call Me Maybe singer, and Francesco Yates, whom some non-Canadians might remember from his feature on Robin Schulz's 2015 song Sugar, were the tour's opening acts. Headley would also end up playing 7 additional shows in 2016 following the tour, or 8 if you count the aforementioned MMVA performance. Toward the end of the summer, Headley ended up releasing one more single from Hello, Can't Slow Down.
She said, Jake, you're a little bit stoned. When you gonna get grown? Would you just come home? I'm so not sure.
Can't Slow Down was released to radio on August 25th, 2016, although it was originally made available as a digital download back on October 2nd, 2015 as a promotional single from Hello. Just like Pocket Full of Dreams from Wildlife, Can't Slow Down is a pop ballad that was also the 4th and final single from its album and is also a meaningful Headley song. If there's any other song I can compare this to, it would be Come Hang Out by AJR from their 2017 album The Click. They're both electropop songs that have a medium slow tempo. They both possess a kind of music and lyrics that could make some fans shed a tear listening to them. Lyrically, they're both songs about chasing your dreams and living the celebrity life, but also realizing the consequences that doing so can have. And the choruses of both songs are partially sung from someone the protagonist has a relationship with. Can't Slow Down is a little bit different from Come Hang Out in that the perspective of the other person on the chorus seems to be the protagonist's mother or girlfriend, whereas on Come Hang Out, it's the protagonist's friends. Both songs also touch on the theme that being a celebrity and playing shows can leave you with little time to spend with the people you care about, which is definitely very true. Spending time with your family, friends, or partner can be difficult when you're constantly touring and playing shows across the country. In the case of Can't Slow Down, Hogarth is acknowledging that some home time would be nice, and that he is feeling intoxicated, but he can't slow down or sober up now, because the lights just went down, and it's time for the show. That reminds me quite a bit of what Hogarth said regarding The Show Must Go 7 years earlier, and the emotions he felt around the time he struggled to balance touring and his then marriage to Tammy. I can definitely buy these emotions, and they definitely feel genuine. While far from Headley's best ballad and, like the previous single, only mid-tier on Hello, Can't Slow Down is still a decent ballad, and one that I can absolutely appreciate. It's definitely a song I appreciate more than I actually like though, as Headley have made way better ballads. Unfortunately, this ended up being the lowest charting single from Hello, peaking number 43 on the Canadian Hot 100 and not receiving any certifications. The song's music video was also later nominated for Best Pop Video at the 2017 MMVAs, which would actually be their last MMVA nomination. The MMVAs would be discontinued after the 2018 show. By the way, this is a bit of a footnote, but I do feel like this is something I'd be remiss not to mention. On November 9th, during their We Day show organized by Free the Children, which was now renamed to We Charity, Headley ended up meeting Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. That's pretty awesome. Although this apparently wasn't the first time Headley met Justin Trudeau at We Day. That's pretty much everything regarding Headley's 6th studio album. Before I move on though, there was one pretty big thing that happened to Headley afterwards that I'd be remiss not to bring up. Chris Crippen, Headley's drummer since 2005, was fired from the band. The band officially told their fans the news in a statement on their official Facebook page on March 31st, 2017.
Friends, we wanted you to hear it from us first. Chris Crippen is starting a new chapter outside of Headley. Our artistic paths have diverged, but that doesn't change the amazing memories we have made together over the last 11 years. We wish Chris the very best in his new adventures. Love, Jacob, Dave, and Tommy.
The way this post is worded is deeply misleading, however. They make it seem like Chris no longer being a part of the band was a mutual agreement between him and the rest of the band, and that he voluntarily left. This was not the case. Crippen was fired from the band. I'll talk a little more about how I know for sure he was fired and the circumstances surrounding him being fired later, but for now, Crippen was no longer a member of Headley. This was the band's first instance of a member being gone since Gijsbrecht, Fedro, Hears, and McKay were replaced in early 2005. It's worth noting, however, that Crippen took a medical absence from drumming in May 2016 due to what would later be diagnosed as writer's syndrome, an illness brought about by high stress, and the last time he performed with Hedley was several months before this Facebook post was posted. According to what Crippen himself has said, he was actually fired around July 2016, not March 2017, but it just wasn't announced until several months later. Jay Bennison, the same guy who replaced Crippen on Everything After over a decade prior, filled in for him for the rest of 2016. I guess the question on everyone's mind now was, how would Hedley fare without their longtime drummer? What would the band make next? Well, Hedley fans wouldn't have to wait long to find out. With Hedley now having earned their first ever #1 album, of course they were going to get to work on another album. First things first though, with Chris Crippen being gone, Hedley needed a new drummer post-haste, and Jay Bennison, the guy who filled in for Crippen in the second half of 2016, became the new permanent drummer. Fun fact, Crippen actually knew Bennison before Hedley. Like I said, Bennison replaced Crippen when he left Everything After, and now he was replacing him in Hedley. Crippen apparently told Bennison, "You take the gig, my friend." I wasn't able to find Jay Bennison's birthday or birthplace online. He doesn't even have a Wikipedia page, but he did seem like a good fit as the new drummer. He did previously know the band, even having played a demo for the song Cha-Ching back in 2009. Bennison continued to test his newfound role as Hedley's permanent drummer with Hedley's next show on June 9, 2017. The first of 7 shows Hedley would play in the summer of 2017, including the We Day show in Ottawa on July 2nd. 4 days after that first show, Hedley's next single was released. On June 13, 2017, fans of Hedley who were already in love with them fell in love again.
Tell me, would you stay if I could love again? If I could love again? If I could love again?
Love Again was the first single from Hedley's upcoming 7th studio album and their first new song with Jay Bennison drumming. It's a mid-tempo pop song about asking an ex-partner if they would stay with the protagonist if they could learn to love again. Even though they fought when they were together and have now broken up, deep down they still miss each other and are thinking of giving this relationship another go. Maybe lyrically it's not super original for Hedley, but I must admit that I really do like Love Again. It's got a nice R&B-esque vibey sound to it. It sort of reminds me of something you hear from Khalid. Funny enough, this song came out in 2017, the same year Khalid broke out thanks to Location and Young, Dumb and Broke. Another song that was popular in 2017 reminds me of is I Feel It Coming by The Weeknd featuring Daft Punk. In fact, this song reminds me a lot of I Feel It Coming.
Tell me, would you stay if I could love again? If I could love again? If I could love again? I feel it coming. I feel it coming, babe. I feel it coming. I feel it coming, babe. Could love again. Could love again. Oh, if I could love again. I feel it coming. I feel it coming, babe. I feel it coming. I feel it coming, babe.
That being said though, I don't think the similarity of both songs is a bad thing, as I really do enjoy both songs. Love Again ended up being a moderately successful song, peaking at number 50 on the Canadian Hot 100 and being certified gold by Music Canada. By the way, the music video for Love Again was actually shot in 360 with virtual reality. Unfortunately, it was taken down from YouTube sometime between 2017 and 2020. As far as I can tell, there wasn't any official given reason for why it was taken down, and due to the fact that it was a 360 video, it couldn't be saved on the web archive. Thankfully though, there is a re-upload of it, but it's not with VR. I'll talk about a possible reason for why the music video could have been taken down later. On July 28, 2017, a new version of Love Again was released, titled Love Again Broke Down.
Tell me, would you stay if I could love again? If I could love again? Oh, if I could love again?
It's basically just a slower, more piano-heavy version of the original song. It's fine, I guess. I definitely prefer the original version of the song though. The song works better as a mid-tempo R&B-esque pop song than as a piano ballad. It sort of reminds me of Heaven's Gonna Wait from Storms, especially with the strings on the final chorus, but even Heaven's Gonna Wait is a better song. Similar to Alice in Wonderland, Afraid, it sort of feels like a standalone B-side since it wasn't put on any Hedley album. On June 18, 2017, Hedley presented the award for Video of the Year at the 2017 MMVAs. The very next day, Hedley would end up winning their very last award, the National Achievement Award at the 2017 SOCAN Awards. Man, National Achievement? I don't think there could have been a better award win to be their last. Anyway though, Love Again was just Hedley's first single from their upcoming 7th studio album. Hedley fans would soon get their second taste of said album on August 23, 2017, when the second single was released, Better Days.
I've been down, burning up like fever. Better days are not so far away.
Better Days is another mid-tempo pop song, though unlike Love Again, it's more of a traditional pop song, especially with the pitch-shifted backing vocals on the verses, the drop on the chorus accompanied with the hey 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 vocals, and the futuristic synth sound on the bridge. Lyrically, it's a song about getting your life back on track and looking ahead to the future, because better days are not so far away. It's definitely not unfamiliar lyrical territory for Hedley, though unlike Love Again, the song isn't explicitly about a past relationship. It's more about past mistakes in general, and trying to improve yourself from them. Another comparison I can make is Mexico from Wildlife, especially the "My life's up in flames and I lit it" line in the first verse. Although it's definitely not as heavy as Mexico, and is more straightforward in its songwriting. Maybe it's not quite as vibey as Love Again, but Better Days is also a decent pop song. It is fairly catchy, and actually, it was my most listened to song on Spotify in 2022. And as for the rest of Canada, they played it enough to have it reach number 42 on the Canadian Hot 100 and be certified platinum. The song, as well as Mother Mother's The Drugs, would earn Brian Howes and JVP a joint nomination for Producer of the Year at the 2018 Junos. Also, like Love Again, Better Days also had a broke down version of it, released on August 25th, 2017.
I've been down, burning up like fever. Better days are not so far away.
Just like the broke down version of Love Again, the broke down version of Better Days moves the song into a slower tempo. It also moves it into a new key and gives it sort of a reggae sound with a skank guitar rhythm. This makes it the second obscure Hedley song to just be a reggae version of a previous song of theirs after I Do Wanna Love You. Of these two broke down songs, I definitely prefer Better Days. If I was sitting in a hammock in the shade between two palm trees on a hot day, I might prefer to play the broke down version of Better Days over the original, but in most contexts, I'd play the original. 1 month later, Hedley's 7th studio album finally came out. Cageless was released on September 29, 2017 on CD, digital, and vinyl. The album contains 10 tracks, the fewest of any standard Hedley LP, and was once again produced by Jacob Hogarth, Brian Howes, and JVP, who also wrote the tracks along with a handful of other songwriters. According to Chris Crippen, the now former drummer, a few of the songs were actually bought from other writers who weren't credited. The album did not have a deluxe edition, becoming their first album since Storms not to receive one, and their first and only album to have just a single version of it, as it didn't have any sort of reissue or alternate track list in another country like all their previous albums. The broke down versions of the two singles might have been good additions as bonus tracks or deluxe edition tracks though. I'll say right up front, Cageless is definitely an improvement over their previous album. Compared to Hello, the melodies on Cageless are a lot catchier and the songs feel a lot less watered down. Whereas Hello went for a more electro-pop sound, Cageless has sort of a tropical sound to it. There's a few songs on here that I could almost call luscious. Songs like Tidal Wave and All Night really do lean into that tropical sound with the guitars and what sounds like a marimba on them. Heck, the former song is called Tidal Wave. That song definitely makes me think of the ocean. I could have definitely seen that song used in a commercial for a tropical resort or Caribbean cruise or something. I definitely think the tropical sound is what the album is going for. I mentioned before about the broke down version of Better Days, giving the song more of a reggae sound. Even the album's cover and the single covers depict pink palm tree leaves. I think it's a nice sound to be honest. It gives the album a very chill, laid-back vibe for the most part. Honestly, if they had added some steel drums or gone with a broke down version of Better Days instead of the regular version, they could have really leaned more into that tropical sound. Of course, being a post-Storms Hedley album, they did still include a fair bit of electronic and synthesized production on here, with the aforementioned pitch-shifted vocals and processed vocals, as well as some auto-tune and a stuttering vocal effect on a couple of these songs. You'll hear varying degrees of those sounds across all of these songs, although it's definitely more prominent on some songs than others. My personal favorite song on the album is In Love with a Broken Heart. I love the smooth guitar line, the harmonized vocals, the overall flow, and the bright foot-tapping melody. It's a song that you could dance along to, or just simply vibe to. It's the perfect song to listen to while relaxing in the sun by the pool. It definitely gives me the vibe of nearby water gently waving in the summer breeze. It almost calls back to Never Too Late on Famous Last Words, which came out a decade before. And that's not the only song on the album that reminds me of a song from Famous Last Words. 17, the final song on the album, reminds me quite a bit of Old School, in that it's another nostalgic song in the key of B-flat major about looking back on younger memories. While definitely not as memorable as Old School, 17 is a song about remembering someone you knew when you were 17 and thought you'd end up marrying but didn't. Now you're alone, and even having sex with someone else doesn't satisfy you. Despite not having spoken to the other person in a while, you still long for them and wonder what happened to them, but you'll never know. I'm actually curious if this song was about anyone in particular. It certainly can't be about Hogarth's ex-wife Tammy, since they did end up marrying, and that was before Hogarth turned 23, and by the time Hogarth was 23, the two were divorced. Anyway, back to the song itself, I really like those processed vocals on the post-chorus. I can't really explain why, but they really drive home that feeling of wistfulness and feeling alone, which is definitely the emotion the song's going for. Whenever this album isn't trying to sound tropical or vibey, it's definitely trying to sound atmospheric, as is the case with a couple of other songs on the album, like Wild, or the aforementioned In Love with a Broken Heart, which is kind of both tropical and atmospheric. These tropical and atmospheric sounds are very nice, and definitely make this album sound much less bland than Hello. And having a tropical sounding album now is certainly perfect timing for Hedley, since tropical pop and tropical house were definitely in at this point. This album came out in 2017, and guess what the biggest song of that year was? The tropical infused Shape of You by Ed Sheeran. A few other tropical songs that were hits that year include Kygo and Selena Gomez's It Ain't Me, Maroon 5 and Kendrick Lamar's Don't Wanna Know, and Jonas Blue and William Singe's Mama. I don't know if Hedley was specifically trying to make their album more tropical sounding to fit in, since it was popular around the time, or if they had the idea for this album's musical direction before the tropical sound went mainstream, but either way, it's a sound that I really like, so I don't really care either way. Not every song cleanly fits into that tropical sound, however. Some songs definitely fit into it better than others. The aforementioned Tidal Wave and All Night are the two songs that fit into it the best. Songs like Love Again and In Love with a Broken Heart have elements of the tropical sound, but they're still not full-on tropical pop songs. Songs like Obsession, Bad Tattoo, and I'm on Fire aren't really that tropical and feel like leftover tracks from Wildlife. By the way, the beginning of Bad Tattoo with a soft piano line sounds like a music box. I also like the strings on the chorus and outro of that song. It reminds me of the strings frequently heard on Storms. Also, I'm on Fire is definitely the one song on this album that doesn't try to sound chill or laid back. Between the prominent electric guitar on the chorus, fast tempo, and lyrics about being a ticking time bomb, speeding down a highway, losing control, it's definitely got an edge to it, especially with that crescendo building up to the chorus that almost sounds like an EDM beat drop. It is a song about leaving a bad relationship after all. Despite being filled with emotions and driving away, the protagonist is claiming they're okay anyway, even if they're on fire. At the same time though, it's not too fast or edgy to the point where it sounds out of place on the album. In fact, it's the first Hedley song in quite a while in which the guitars aren't muted. It's definitely a breath of fresh air to hear Dave Rosin's guitar playing prominently heard on a Hedley song after what feels like forever. The one song on here that doesn't fit into the album's tropical sound at all is Better Days, which apparently was one of the last songs written for the album. Like I said, that song's a straightforward pop song, and definitely the poppiest song on the album, with all that electronic production. Of course, it's not the most processed song on the album. That honor goes to Wild, which, by the way, is the song where the album's title comes from, with a line on the first verse. Wild contains some more Daft Punk-esque vocals on it, just like on Love Again, along with pitch-shifted vocals on the chorus, and the auto-tuned vocals on the bridge. I do like the echoey backing vocals and aforementioned atmospheric sound of the song, however. I do wish for a song about how the protagonist is going crazy like an animal inside of them, his partner is cageless, and the two of them are born to be wild. They could have maybe added some animal sounds like a jaguar roaring or something. Maybe having jungle animal sounds or sounds of a jungle or the tropics in general could have also fit with the album's tropical sound, but alas. Still doesn't detract from a decent song though. Unlike their previous two albums, Cageless doesn't have any tracks I consider to be mediocre or below average. Every song on here is pretty good. The weakest song on here is probably Tidal Wave, and even at that, it's not really that bad. It's just sort of okay. It's about as good as the average song from the standard edition of Hello. That already makes Cageless an improvement over Hello. Definitely not Hedley's best album, but a decent one. It ended up peaking at number 2 on the Canadian albums chart. Shania Twain's Now unfortunately kept 2 back-to-back number 1 Hedley albums from happening. The album was later nominated for Pop Album of the Year at the 2018 Juno Awards. To help promote the album, Hedley embarked on the Cageless Tour in 2018. The tour lasted from February 5th to March 23rd, taking place in 30 locations across Canada, with fellow Canadian artists Sean Hook and and Neon Dreams as supporting acts. Cageless marked a number of disappointing firsts for Headley. In addition to being the first album without an alternate version or release of it, and with fewer than 11 tracks on it, it also contained the fewest number of official singles of any Headley album, only 2. Although it does seem to be up in the air as to whether or not Obsession was released as the album's 3rd single. It has its own single page on Spotify and AllMusic. However, it was never released to radio, and it never charted on the Canadian Hot 100 or any of its component charts, so I'm not counting it. It's possible it was just a promotional single. Both of the 2 undoubtedly official singles failed to reach the top 40, making Cageless Headley's first album to not contain any top 40 singles. Compare this to Hello, their previous album, which had 4 singles, 2 of which hit the top 40, and 1 of which hit the top 20. Wildlife, the album before that, had 4 singles, all of which hit the top 40, 3 of which hit the top 20, and 2 of which hit the top 10. And Storms, the album before that, had 3 singles, all of which hit the top 20, 2 of which hit the top 10, and 1 of which almost hit number 1. There definitely seemed to be a declining trend in Headley's popularity. Even Cageless itself was indicative of that. It was the band's first album to not go platinum. Heck, it didn't even go gold. It seemed that slowly but surely, Headley's popularity was tapering off. Sure, the band was still a fairly well-known name in Canadian music, and they were still scoring songs on the radio, but it was definitely not to the same extent as they were in the late 2000s and early 2010s. I don't think this was just because they had now sold out, or because fans didn't like the new drummer. This happens to every artist eventually. They reach their peak in popularity, and then it begins to wane. Going full-on pop probably did prolong the inevitable by a few years, but now, it seemed that it was time for them to face the facts. Their popularity seemed to be fading out. If all that wasn't enough, in early 2018, something huge happened that would result in Headley's popularity taking an even bigger hit. And yeah, let's talk about that now.
He just kept like telling me that I was being a good girl and like petting my head. And
before I go any further, I need to give a trigger warning here. I'm going to be talking about some sensitive subject matter, namely rape, sexual harassment, and homophobia. If those are sensitive topics for you, I completely understand. Feel free to click out of the video now. If you're under 18, I would also highly recommend clicking out now. February 12th, 2018 can officially be described as the day Headley's career began to come to an end. On that day, an anonymous Twitter account under the handle @_CND and Psycho posted a story alleging Jacob Hoggard of groping them in 2015. Headley's show in Manitoba that night had been cancelled, and they were at a bar watching another performance. Outside the bar, @_CND and Psycho said that Hoggard grabbed their buttocks. They also encouraged other people to share any inappropriate stories they had about Headley, and began using the hashtag OutHeadley2K18. More than 50 people came forward anonymously, with stories of inappropriate experiences with the band, most of them against Hoggard. Very quickly, hashtag OutHeadley2K18 began to pick up steam and trend on Twitter. The person behind the account @_CND and Psycho would later reveal themselves as Taylor Bauman, a 21-year-old woman from Manitoba. Bauman said that she finally chose to put a face behind the account, as she felt like doing so would make people more likely to take these stories seriously. This happened during the height of the Me Too movement. It was only about 4 months before Bauman's initial tweet that the reports about Harvey Weinstein came out. As you can imagine, in a society that had grown increasingly intolerant of sexual harassment and assault, the public did not take kindly to these allegations. In less than 48 hours, Headley had gone from beloved Canadian icons to pariahs. The band was just over a week into the Cageless tour at the time, but it was clear that they needed to make some sort of response to the allegations. Said response came in the form of a Facebook post on February 14, 2018, which reads as follows.
All of us in Headley respect and applaud the Me Too movement and the open and honest discussion it has inspired. We believe these conversations are particularly important within the music industry, which does not exactly have an enviable history of treating women with the respect they deserve. We appreciate the bravery of those who have come forward with their own stories, and we realize that all of us, as individuals and as a society, can and must do better when it comes to this issue. However, if we are to have a meaningful, open, and honest discussion, we all have to accept and respect that there are at least 2 sides to every story. The recent allegations against us posted on social media are simply unsubstantiated and have not been validated. We would hope that people will bear in mind the context in which these unsupported accusations have been made before passing judgment on us as individuals or as a band. We realize the life of a touring band is an unconventional one. While we are all now either married or have entered into committed, long-term relationships, there was a time, in the past, when we engaged in a lifestyle that incorporated certain rock and roll cliches. However, there was always a line that we would never cross. We realize this conversation is as important to our fans as it is to us, and we never want to distract from these important discussions. To that end, as we move forward, we will be evaluating some of our next steps. Hedley's music should only ever be a positive force, and our performances and personal appearances should continue to be inclusive and safe experiences that bring nothing but joy and happiness to our fans.
Unfortunately, this didn't do much to quell the backlash. The very day after this Facebook post was posted, Rob Bazinet, a worker at an all-ages venue in London, Ontario, known as the Embassy, recounted a story from which Hedley played at his venue on September 18, 2005. Not only did he say that the band members acted like jerks to everyone all throughout the day, but after the show was over, he went to the apartment above the venue that the band was staying at and saw one of the doors closed, with one of the band members inside. When he went over to the door, 2 of the other 3 members blocked him from entering. Crippen had been driven back home to the hotel by a fan immediately after the show due to getting a lung infection. Later, after the band had packed up and left, a young woman was found unconscious with no shoes by the TD Bank, about a block away from the Embassy. She had a black X stamped on her hand, which all minors who came to Hedley's show had to signify them as such at the all-ages venue. She was taken to the hospital and given a blood test, where Rohypnol, a date rape drug, was found in her system. The girl's shoes were later found in the apartment Hedley was staying at. Yeah, let that sink in for a moment. Now, according to Chris Crippen, Hedley never did any drugs besides alcohol or smoking, but it's still incredibly uncomfortable that Hedley were the primary suspects in a potential date rape case. Very quickly, Hedley's reputation and career came crashing down. In the days following the allegations, their management teams at Watchdog Management and the Feldman Agency cut ties with them. Radio stations across Canada began pulling their music from rotation. Nearly all of the organizations Hedley had previously worked with, including We Charity and Air Miles, also cut ties with them. Neon Dreams and later Sean Hook both dropped out of the Cages tour. The band's scheduled performance at the 2018 Juno Awards was cancelled, and all of their nominations at said show were rescinded. Lizzie Renaud, a tattoo artist from Toronto and former friend of Hogarth since 2005, who actually did the tattoo text on the music video for Gunnin' back in 2006, offered to cover up any Hedley tattoos that fans got and now regretted. Some fans did indeed take her up on that. By the way, the organizations who worked with Hedley cutting ties with them may actually be the reason why the Love Again music video was taken down, as it was sponsored by Samsung, which was another organization Hedley worked with that likely cut ties with them around this time. Going back to Watchdog Management cutting ties with them, Darren Gilmore, the president of Watchdog Management, and the man who introduced Hogarth to his future bandmates after his appearance on Canadian Idol, would end up admitting that mistakes had been made regarding the band.
The band was challenging to work with. At the time, we chalked it up to immaturity, attention-seeking, and shock value. I regret not having taken stronger action at the time.
Of course, he wasn't the only person working directly with Hogarth who was uncomfortable with his actions. Remember when I mentioned earlier that Chris Crippen, Hedley's ex-drummer, was fired from the band in July 2016? Well, he would later open up about his experiences with Hedley. In an interview he gave with CBC reporter Judy Trin several months after the allegations came out, he spoke about some of the things he witnessed while he was with the band.
Well, at the meet and greet, for instance, just maybe being overly touchy. Certainly some of the comments were, to say not professional would be to downplay it a lot. So a lot of his humor is shock humor, right? So things with massive homosexual overtones, or calling fans, female fans would walk up and he would say, hey, you fucking sluts, how you doing? You know, and then I go to say something and the other guys in the band are like, whatever. And I'm like, do I have any support here? Can I get an amen on, hey man, let's not treat the people who put the food on our table and buy our houses for us like this, if you don't mind.
Crippen shared some group emails containing examples of Hogarth's lewd humor. The recipients included the rest of the band, as well as their songwriters, producers, and managers. These emails go as far back as 2012. In one email from 2016, Tommy Mac asked which Juno categories the band was nominated for, to which Hogarth replied all with, AIDS, rape. Yikes. Hogarth would also often share lewd photos and videos of himself and the women he had been with, and also send offensive illustrations he drew in those group emails. I'm not even going to mention what was in those because I don't feel comfortable discussing it and it's probably not YouTube friendly. Let's just say that these illustrations were laced with bigotry and leave it at that. To be absolutely fair, Hedley's always had a bit of an edgy side to them, even from the beginning. I mentioned a while back about some of the antics from the Try This at Home DVD. You could argue that the mid-2000s was a different time, and that a lot of this is just edgy humor that was commonplace back then, and that these were the rock and roll cliches that they were referring to, but one, that doesn't make it okay, and two, there's a major difference between joking around and being exploitative, and I'd say that sharing lewd photos definitely crosses that line. Also, if anything, these allegations and testimonies coming out only makes the fact that Hogarth did indecent exposure and pants and slapped the butt of one of his bandmates who was in handcuffs even worse. Crippen also mentioned that during his time with Hedley, Hogarth would tell him to shut the F up, and would frequently call him a certain slur that rhymes with this angry beaver. This behavior would only become worse as the band's popularity grew, and Hogarth continued to push his reckless behavior with each new hit the band got. All while this was happening, Crippen was effectively the only person speaking out against Hogarth's behavior. Everyone else around them, including the other two members of Hedley, were excusing Hogarth's behavior and dismissing Crippen. Toward the end of his time with Hedley, Crippen's relationship with Hogarth and the other bandmates was at a low point. While they were on the road, Crippen would ask for a separate hotel room, far away from the rest of the band. Continuing to be in Hedley made him grow stressful and anxious, hence his writer's syndrome during the Hello World tour. That's when he finally decided he wanted out. Despite being warned by his lawyer that getting fired would result in a larger settlement than him quitting voluntarily, the former is what ultimately happened. And it was this being mentioned in the article summarizing his interview, as well as Crippen's official website, which is no longer up, saying he was fired, which is how I know for sure that he was fired and didn't mutually leave, like Hedley's Facebook post announcing his departure implied. Also, Crippen himself told me that he was fired. And just so everyone is clear, right, you were fired from the band. You didn't voluntarily leave or mutually leave. You were fired, right?
Under great advice, I made myself more difficult to work with than I felt that they were willing to put up with. Let's put it that way.
Oh, by the way, I actually reached out to Chris Crippen, and he agreed to do an interview with me for this video. Link to the full interview is in the description and the card. All the times in this video where I've been saying, according to Chris Crippen, those were all things I learned directly from him. Anyway, in response to Crippen's allegations, the band's lawyer posted the following statement.
The members of Hedley understand that the CBC has received false and/or out-of-context allegations made by a disgruntled and bitter former member of our group, whose axe grinding and bias against us should be obvious to any fair-minded observer. This hatchet job, coming from a person with little credibility and serious issues of his own, seems intended not to inform, but to shock and inflame public sentiment.
Intended to shock and inflame public sentiment. Well, that isn't the pot calling the kettle black. By the way, one thing I feel like is worth mentioning is the fact that most of the alleged incidents against Hogarth only go as far back as the Storms era. That's also around the time when Hogarth began to take more of a leadership role in Hedley, and when fans say their music became more poppy and less rock. Make of that what you will. On February 25th, 2018, the most infamous allegation against Hogarth came to light. An anonymous woman from Ottawa accused Hogarth of raping her in a hotel room in Toronto. The woman had been a volunteer at the We Day concert in Ottawa on November 9, 2016. After swiping her right on Tinder, Hogarth began to communicate with her through Snapchat. Although flattered by being noticed by a celebrity, she was too shy to meet him in person that day. After continuing to communicate through Snapchat, the two made plans to hook up. Hogarth bought her a round-trip train ticket to Toronto to come see him while he was staying at the Thompson Hotel on November 22, 2016. As soon as she got there, she texted Hogarth, who came down to take her up to his room. Although she was expecting there to be sex, nothing could have prepared her for what ended up happening. Immediately after stepping foot into the hotel room, Hogarth pushed the woman against a wall and kissed her. When she pushed him away, Hogarth accused her of being talky-talky. About an hour passed, and Hogarth began to settle down. The two chatted for a while before a hotel employee knocked on the door and told Hogarth that his regular room was ready. Hogarth left to go to the new room and told the woman to wait 5 minutes before following him, which she did. Upon entering the new room, that's when things really took a turn for the unpleasant. Hogarth immediately confiscated her phone, as he didn't want her taking photos of the two of them together. The two of them sat down on the room's king-size bed and turned on a movie. Only about 10 minutes into the movie, that's when it finally happened. Hogarth... Okay, I can't even say on YouTube the details about what allegedly happened next, because this video would definitely get age restricted if I did, and I might already be walking that fine line. I'll put a link to an article in the description where the woman recounts her story if you're morbidly curious. Go ahead and read it at your own discretion. Anyway, after about 5 hours of being in the Thompson Hotel, Hogarth told the woman he needed to go to a meeting. He gave back her phone and called a taxi for her. The woman cried as she got in the taxi and was dropped off at a nearby Tim Hortons. While waiting for her train ride back to Ottawa, she called her friend and told them what happened. On her train ride back home, Hogarth texted her about quote-unquote what a great day they had together. The next day, the woman texted him back, accusing him of rape. Hours later, Hogarth called her phone, telling her not to contact him again before blocking her number. A few days later, she went to a doctor to have her injuries examined and get tested for STDs. A few weeks later, she deleted her entire text history with Hogarth. In response to the story, Hogarth's lawyer posted the following statement.
Jacob met Blank on Tinder. They agreed to get together to have sex. She traveled from Ottawa to his hotel in Toronto to be with him for that purpose. They spent the afternoon together and had consensual sex. She went back to Ottawa the same day. Jacob is very sorry that Blank is upset, but that does not change the fact that they made a mutual plan to get together to have sex, and they did just that. At no time did Jacob act badly or do anything without Blank's consent.
The woman, however, disputed Hogarth's definition of consent, arguing that it doesn't give him permission to do whatever he wants, and that you can change your mind at any point before sex is about to begin. Despite all the allegations, some fans of Hedley continue to support them regardless, continuing to come to their shows and spreading a hashtag of their own, #IStandWithHedley. A petition had even been made to lift the ban of Hedley's music from the radio stations that had pulled it, which ended up receiving over 4,000 signatures. Suffice to say, the petition failed. Randy Lennox, the same man who signed Hedley back in 2005, was now president of Bell Media, which controlled 3/4 of all radio stations in Canada, and he called the shots about who could be played on his stations, including the now disgraced band he signed over a decade ago. On February 28, 2018, Jacob Hogarth posted the following statement on Twitter.
It's time to speak for myself, as I should have done from the beginning. In the face of multiple allegations, I have to speak out and address these concerns. I need to be completely clear. I have never engaged in non-consensual sexual behavior in my life. Ever. However, over the last 13 years, I have behaved in a way that objectified women. The way I've treated women was reckless and dismissive of their feelings. I understand the significant harm that is caused not only to the women I interacted with, but to all women who were degraded by this type of behavior. I have been careless and indifferent, and I have no excuse. For this, I am truly sorry. To my many female fans, I want you to know that you deserve nothing but dignity and respect from every man in your life. To the people that have always had faith in me, and the institutions and organizations that believed in me, I'm so sorry for letting you down. I promise to work every day to regain your respect. I know it won't happen overnight. I was given a position of leadership and power, and I mishandled it. I will regret this for the rest of my life. I've let down my family, my friends, and so many fans. I'm sorry. It's time for me to change. I've decided to step away from my career indefinitely. I will honor my commitments to this tour, then will be taking a serious step back in order to make real changes in my life, seek guidance from my family, and continue to grow and learn from the amazing women in my life. I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can be the man you thought I was, the man I was raised to be.
Yeah, this is about as sincere as any celebrity's social media apology. It sort of reminds me of Dan Schneider's response to Quiet on Set, where he admits fault for some of the stuff he's accused of, but doesn't take full accountability. And it seemed it was already too little too late for Hogarth. His band's public image had already suffered too hard of a blow, and those who had already lost respect for him weren't willing to forgive him. In particular, the Ottawa woman who accused Hogarth of raping her believed that he was only sorry he got caught, and that he doesn't understand what consent means. The same day as Hogarth's tweet, Hedley's Twitter account tweeted its own statement.
Over the past 2 weeks, there have been accusations made against us on social media and in the mainstream media. As a result, we as a band, and as individuals, have been forced to take a long, hard look in the mirror. No excuses are going to be made by any of us. We clearly have some soul-searching to do. That begins by us saying that we are truly sorry, as individuals and as a band, to anyone who has been negatively affected by our behavior. We have unanimously decided to continue this tour to the end. Following this tour, Hedley will be taking an indefinite hiatus to work on our personal relationships and who we are as individuals. We have chosen to honor our commitment to this tour for our crew, who are like family to us, for the countless people that depend on this tour for their livelihood, our families, and most importantly, for our fans, who have supported us and believed in us from the very beginning. This has been the most difficult decision of our lives. To the people we have let down, we are truly sorry and we hope to one day earn your forgiveness. We will work every day of our lives to be better. We remain very proud of the music we've made and shared over the last 15 years. That music, and our relationship with our fans, will always be in our hearts, and will bond us together forever.
Many Hedley fans, former and present, might have found it impossible to ever trust him again after all these allegations surfacing. However, credit where it's due, Headley did stay true to their word with this announcement. Despite having their March 11th and March 20th shows in Windsor, Ontario and Cold Lake, Alberta cancelled due to the allegations, and their March 16th show in Thunder Bay, Ontario downsized to a smaller venue, Headley finished the Cageless tour as promised before going on permanent hiatus. On March 23rd, Headley played their very last show in Kelowna, BC, about 75 kilometers northeast of the small mining town that gave the band their name. At the end of the show, Hogarth told the audience, "This is good night, not goodbye." Unfortunately, or fortunately depending on who you ask, it would in fact be goodbye for Headley. After 15 years, 7 studio albums, 1 live album, and 29 official singles, Headley's career was officially over. After this, the members of Headley went their separate ways. Chris Crippen, who had already been gone from the band for over a year by this point, was working as a carpenter, just like his former colleague, as well as on his own music career. This time, he wanted to be the frontman of his own band. Unfortunately, due to his association with Headley, he had trouble finding anyone, including songwriters or producers, who were willing to work with him. Since 2021, he's been releasing solo music under the stage name Mr. Crippen, and actually recently released his debut solo album, #MeToo Drive By, on April 12, 2024. By the way, his song Take It to Heart is a giant FU song to Jacob Hogarth. Give it a listen if you're into angsty hard rock songs that are directed at a real person. Tommy Mac joined a new band, Day of the Dog, in 2021, still playing bass. Their first single, a cover of Johnny Ringo's Rockin' Is My Business, was released on June 22nd, 2023. Check it out if you're into classic rock, like Bon Jovi or Guns N' Roses or AC/DC. As for Dave Rosen and Jay Bennison, the two of them seem to have gone offline for obvious reasons. I wasn't really able to find any information online about what either of them have been doing since 2018. According to Chris Crippen, Rosen moved to a small town in BC with his wife and son and got an electrician license. Bennison got a gig with a well-known cover band in Vancouver that Crippen coveted the position for, although Bennison seems to have now gone completely off the grid. However, the band member with the most notable post-band life is none other than Jacob Hogarth. On July 23rd, 2018, following a 4-month investigation that began on March 16th, Hogarth turned himself into the Toronto police. He was promptly arrested and charged with 2 counts of sexual assault causing bodily harm and 1 count of sexual interference. His accusers consisted of the anonymous Ottawa woman and another woman who was allegedly assaulted by Hogarth when she was under 16 years old, which is the legal age of consent in Canada, and also had a very similar story of being raped by Hogarth after she turned 16 in a hotel room in Mississauga, Ontario, only 2 months before the Toronto woman's story. Hogarth's first court hearing was set for September 12th. Additional hearings took place on October 10th, November 7th, November 28th, and December 19th. A judicial pretrial was set for December 10th. Hogarth did not show up to court on any of these dates, and was instead represented by his lawyer, Ian Smith. Hogarth finally appeared in court for his preliminary hearing on July 11, 2019. The hearing lasted 2 days, and ended with Ontario Court Justice Mara Green ruling that Hogarth would face a trial by jury for the 3 charges against him. Another hearing was scheduled for August 23rd, to which Hogarth pleaded not guilty. After another hearing on September 27th, the 4-week trial by jury was set to begin on January 4th, 2021. However, the trial ended up being delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It was pushed forward to April 2021, then to January 2022, and finally to May 2022. By this time, Hogarth had returned to his pre-musician job as a carpenter, and was now married to his second wife, Canadian actress Rebecca Asselstein, whom he married on New Year's Eve 2018, and with whom he had a young son. The long-awaited trial finally began on May 2nd at the Ontario Superior Court of Justice, with some hearings for procedural matters. The trial's jury was chosen 2 days later, consisting of 10 men and 2 women. On May 5th, Crown Attorney Kelly Slate gave her opening statement to the prosecutors, consisting of the stories of the 2 alleged victims. On May 6th, the woman who was allegedly raped in Mississauga gave her testimony. She actually broke down in tears recounting the story. On May 10th, the Ottawa woman gave her testimony as well. On May 13th, the Ottawa woman's friend, whom she called shortly after the alleged incident occurred, testified. The friend said that the Ottawa woman sounded distraught. When the friend went to see her in person the following day, she was limping and appeared to be in pain. On May 25th, Stephen Wigita, the limousine driver who drove the younger woman to and from the hotel where the alleged incident occurred, testified. He remarked that she was very quiet on the way back home. On May 31st, a new rape allegation against Hogarth came out, this time from a British Columbia woman who alleged Hogarth of assaulting her in Kirkland Lake, Ontario when she was 19, after seeing him in concert on June 24, 2016, and going to an after-party behind the hotel Hogarth was staying at. The court date for this incident's trial was scheduled for November 24th, although I haven't been able to confirm any new information for this trial post-2022. All I've been able to confirm was that this too was a trial by jury. There were additional scheduled court hearings for December 14th and January 19th, 2023, and that Hogarth planned to plead not guilty to this additional charge. Anyway, getting back to Hogarth's current trial, During his own testimony, he admitted to lying to the younger woman in the time before the alleged incident, and even floated the idea of marrying her. He also admitted to hiding his infidelity by deleting messages, photos, and videos, as well as saving women's phone numbers under male names on his phone. One of the people he hid this from was Asselstein, his wife. Being part of a band that was touring all across Canada gave him plenty of opportunities for affairs, hookups, and one-night stands. Despite this, though, he still continued to plead not guilty and insisted the sex was consensual. Unfortunately, it didn't seem that the jury was on his side. On June 5th, 2022, after 6 days of deliberation, the jury made their decision. Hogarth was officially found guilty of sexual assault causing bodily harm against the Ottawa woman, although he was acquitted of the 2 other charges. The conviction carried with it a maximum sentence of 14 years in prison. Justice Gillian Roberts imposed new bail conditions on Hogarth, including not being able to own a passport and being grounded to his own province of British Columbia, except for when he would have to travel to Toronto to appear in court. Hogarth appealed the decision, though I haven't been able to confirm if anything came from the appeal. According to criminal defense lawyer Ari Goldkind, who did a few interviews talking about Hogarth's verdict after it was released, about 99.9% of appeals for sexual assault guilty verdicts get shot down, at least in Canada, so I think it's safe to say that Hogarth's appeal was thrown out. On October 3rd, 2022, the Ottawa woman sued Hogarth for $2.8 million, arguing that she had suffered damages and losses as a result of her encounter with Hogarth. These included a deterioration of her mental and physical health, inability to finish her post-secondary education, or even earn a living. I haven't been able to confirm if there's been any updates on this lawsuit. On October 17th, 2022, a judicial pretrial was held in Haileybury, Ontario. 3 days later, on October 20th, Hogarth's sentence was announced. Justice Gillian Roberts told the court that Hogarth would serve 5 years in prison. Additionally, he was also placed on the sex offender registry for 20 years and was banned for owning weapons for 10 years. Following the announcement, Hogarth then hugged a sobbing Asselstein for a considerable amount of time and whispered, "I love you" to her, before being placed in handcuffs and led away. And unfortunately, that's where the story of Hedley officially comes to an end. And that's a complete story and look back at potentially the most popular Canadian artist of the 21st century that was only popular in Canada. It's a shame that Hedley's story had to end where it did, but stories have to end somewhere. Hedley's career as a band is effectively dead. With the exception of a couple of miscellaneous Facebook posts, all the band's official social media accounts have been abandoned or deleted since the Cageless tour ended. Even their official website, HedleyOnline.com, now belongs to a digital marketing agency called Hedley Digital, which was founded in April 2020. I really can't see Hedley ever making any new music again. Not with everything that came out about Jacob Hogarth and him being sentenced to prison time. While there have been some musicians who have been able to survive getting cancelled, like Chris Brown or Morgan Wallen, I really don't see how Hedley can come back from this. Being convicted of and sentenced for rape is pretty much the final nail in the coffin for anyone's career. Just ask Bill Cosby. I'm sure Hedley's diehard fans forgive Jacob, but between the specifics of the allegations, the fact that they surfaced during the height of the Me Too movement, and the fact that Jacob was convicted of at least one of them in court, it seems too little too late for them. There may be some reunion concert down the line when Jacob's prison sentence ends, possibly, but I can't see a new single or studio album ever happening. Between the allegations, as well as their popularity clearly dying down even before the allegations surfaced, I can't see any record label wanting to sign them now. If I had to guess how the band would have continued their career if the allegations against Hogarth had never come out, or if he had never acted inappropriately in the first place, I imagine there would have been maybe 1 or 2 new singles released from Cageless in 2018 after the Cageless tour. Then they would have released their 8th studio album in late 2019, going along with the pattern of Hedley albums being released in the second half of odd-numbered years. It probably would have just been more pop music, but like how Hello tried to be a little more EDM sounding, and Cageless tried to be a little more tropical sounding, their 8th studio album might have tried a slightly new music angle while still staying pop. That album would have probably produced, at most, 1 top 40 single and failed to go platinum too. Also, their tour to promote their 8th studio album probably would have either ended early or been cancelled due to COVID-19. Then of course, their 9th studio album likely would have come out in late 2021, and their 10th would have come out in late 2023. If Hedley was still making new music today, I can honestly imagine them going back to their pop-punk roots. I mentioned this in my Avril Lavigne Love Sucks review, but pop-punk did have a bit of a revival in the early 2020s, thanks to artists like Machine Gun Kelly, Black Bear, and Youngblood. Maybe Avril Lavigne could have been an opening act for their 9th or 10th album tour. 2 Canadian pop-punk artists from the 2000s trying to make a comeback with their old pop-punk sound. What a perfect match! Of course, that's just me speculating. I will say, going and listening through Hedley's entire discography for this retrospective was definitely interesting. I find Hedley to be a very interesting band to talk about, and I'm glad I was able to go in depth with their careers and discography. I'm definitely not going to say that Hedley's music was super influential or that anything they put out was a masterpiece, but there's definitely a lot to say regarding their music, the evolution of their sound over the course of their careers, and how their careers began and unfortunately ended. I hope I made it clear why I consider Hedley to be Canada's Maroon 5. They have a surprisingly lot in common with Maroon 5. Both bands broke out in the mid-2000s, they were both hugely successful from the beginning, they both slowly became full-on pop as time went on, they're both accused of selling out for that, they both put more focus on the lead singer over time, leading many people to claim they're not even real bands, both the lead singers have been alleged of acting inappropriately with women, and as of the release of this video, they've both released 7 studio albums. Heck, even each of their LPs in order has some striking parallels. Both of their first LPs clearly established their original sound, their second LPs were mostly continuations of the sound from their first LPs, their third LPs were the first signs they were starting to go pop, their fourth LPs were their attempt to make a much poppier record, their fifth LP cemented that they had gone full on pop, their sixth LPs contained their most watered down sound yet, and their seventh LPs featured a more tropical sound. Of course, like Maroon 5, Hedley's transition into pop was gradual. They didn't go straight from their original pop-punk/pop rock sound of one album to full-on pop in their very next album. Going full-on pop isn't necessarily a bad thing in my opinion though, and I personally don't like to call any artist a sellout, since you don't always know for sure what their motives were with changing their sound. But I mean, when you go from having a song on your first album that sounds like this, to having a song on your last album that sounds like this, it's hard not to receive selling out complaints. But as I made it clear in this video, I do enjoy quite a good bit of Hedley's music from their pop era. To be quite honest, I listen to Crazy For You, Kiss You Inside Out, and Hello about as often as I listen to On My Own, 321, and For the Nights I Can't Remember. I know some Hedley fans dropped off when Storms or Wildlife came out, but I still think they managed to be decent even after they went full on pop. And even when they had gone full on pop, there were still hints of their old roots on songs like Mexico from Wildlife or I'm on Fire from Cageless. That's definitely more than I can say from Maroon 5. If there is one thing to take away from this video, it's that fame can make people change, both in their art and their character. It can make them sell out to a mainstream audience by changing their sound, or even commit sexual assault. Maybe in hindsight, it's a good thing that Hedley wasn't famous anywhere else but Canada. If his behavior got worse as Hedley's popularity grew, imagine how much worse it could have gotten if his popularity had grown outside of Canada. I guess you could say it's a blessing and a curse. I hope to any fans of Hedley, you found this to be an interesting look back on the band and their careers. I hope to anyone who's never heard of Hedley before this video, that I piqued your interest in this Canadian band from my descriptions and clips you've heard, and inspired you to seek out some of their music, even if they're not making new music anymore. Oh, and one more thing. To anyone who's gonna tell me that I shouldn't be listening to or recommending their music because doing so is endorsing or downplaying what Jacob Hogarth did or supporting a rapist, you can enjoy a piece of media while still acknowledging the person behind it is a terrible human being. It doesn't mean you agree with what they did. Good people can make bad art, and bad people can make good art. Besides, you might not even be directly supporting them at all. I spoke about this topic more in my response to Spectrum Pulse video about separating art from the artist, so go watch that if you want my further thoughts on this topic. In fact, before I close out, let's hear what Chris Crippen thinks about people continuing to listen to Hedley's music today.
And despite everything that's come out against Jacob Hogarth and including him being a convicted rapist, there are still a lot of people, myself included, who are still fans of Hedley's music and continue to listen to it because we genuinely like the music. How do you feel about that? Does it make you feel uncomfortable knowing that some people are continuing to listen to the music of someone who's a convicted rapist? Are you okay if people want to separate art from the artist and continue to enjoy Hedley's music despite what we now know about Jacob?
Well, I guess that's up to them. That's interesting. I wonder if people are listening. No, because I listen to because of you and I've been talking, and oddly enough, when you suggest that people want to still hear the music, I have a friend of mine telling me that he wants to do basically a Hedley cover band, and then already has a gig for us should I agree to it. And so I've been listening to the tunes for the first time in years, and yeah, there was just some real great fire that came out of that Canadian Idol thing, which people could take that Canadian Idol thing, even if they don't admit it, they're like, oh, but it's just the Canadian Idol thing. But then we take that and make these 2 records that were just really great. And I can see why people would want to go back to that. I mean, shit, yeah, it's the same as anything. You go back to that time, and then, you know, you finish that album and you think, oh yeah, you know, can you believe what happened? Yeah.
Well, that's pretty reassuring. If Hedley's former drummer, who had very few good things to say about his former colleagues, got dragged through the mud toward the end of his time with them, and has been struggling to get his own solo career off the ground because of his association with Hedley, is still okay with people listening to Hedley's music, then I don't think there's any reason to feel guilty about continuing to listen to it. Big shout out to Chris Crippen for not only agreeing to do an interview with me for this video, again, click the link in the description or the card to watch the full interview, but also reading over my script to make sure everything I said was correct, and giving me a lot of really interesting and juicy information for me to say in this video. Also, happy belated birthday to Chris Crippen. As of the day this video is premiering on my YouTube channel on August 5th, 2024, yesterday was Chris Crippen's 50th birthday. To those of you who are watching this video during the premiere, go wish Chris a happy belated birthday on social media after the premiere ends in a few minutes. Let him know Simeon/Norbert told you to wish him one. And go ahead and listen to Crippen's solo music if you want to support his post-Hedley music career. Again, his debut solo album, #MeTooDriveBy, came out this year. Thank you so much to Chris for helping me out with this video, and thank you as well for watching this video. Congrats if you actually made it to the very end. For any fans of Hedley, let me know in the comments what your favorite Hedley song or album is, and whether or not you still like them after they went full on pop, or only discovered them after they had gone full on pop. And for everyone watching, let me know if you enjoyed this very long documentary style video. I'm not sure if I'll ever make a video like this again, but only time will tell. I'll see you all very soon. Till then, there's gotta be a better way. I'm gone.